Chapter 765. The Night Spirit did not speak, nor did he transform into his true form. He merely stood out silently with an expressionless face, guarding Ning from behind. That pair of deep, dark eyes revealed a complicated emotion that was hard to understand. It was not fear. It was more like concern. Nianqi's hands and feet were bound by the Protoss. He looked dispirited and his withered, yellow hair covered his peerless face. Nianqi kept his head lowered and remained silent. He. The Protoss leader raised an eyebrow and said with a half-smile, "Looks like you Rakshasas haven't come out for a long time. Even these nobodies dare to clamor with you. I think you're the nobodies." Since they were already at this point, the spirit tiger went all out and declared loudly, "Your grandpa who will never change his name. I am Hu Badian. You have a death wish." The Protoss leader's face darkened. The Rakshasa leader laughed and said, "Looks like you Protoss aren't any better. I don't eat human flesh, but I heard that tiger bones are great tonics. Leave this Linghu to me, Protoss." The Protoss leader looked down with an arrogant expression and said calmly, "Killing you is as easy as squashing an ant to me. Don't say that I'm bullying you. If you can defeat the most ordinary member of my Protoss race, I'll give you a chance to live." As soon as he said that, a Protoss stood out. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, and exquisite facial features. He stared at Linghu with a murderous look in his eyes. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Gritting his teeth, the spirit tiger braced himself and stood out. To be fair, this was the best outcome. The Protoss leader and the Rakshasa leader were both Jin Dan realm cultivators, but they could kill Jining Jinjuan across realms. They were no match for them. If it was an ordinary Protoss or Rakshasa, they might have a chance of winning. The Rakshasa leader was excited and laughed menacingly. "As long as any of you can defeat my race, I can spare your lives. Since you guys want to send yourselves to death one by one, I won't hold back." Monkey strode to the front and punched his chest, shouting with a murderous aura, "Who dares to fight?" Both sides were already in formation and ready to fight. Where did this demon monkey come from? How dare you be so arrogant? You have a death wish. A Rakshasa spread his wings and soared into the air, charging towards Monkey in a flash. That single movement caused a battle between both sides. Apart from the Protoss race against Linghu, Little Fatty, Leng Ro, Ji Qingtian, Shi Jian, Ming, Demoness Ji, Monkey, Qing, Night Spirit, Little, Ning, Little Fatty, Leng Ro, Ji Qingtian, Shi, Ming, Demoness Ji, Ling. Be it the individual Protoss or the 13 Rakshasas, all of them possessed terrifying combat strength. However, Little Fatty and the others had different strengths. Monkey had a torrential ferocity and relied on his immense strength, ferocious fist techniques and agile movements to gain the upper hand such that the Rakshasas did not dare to get close to him. Ming Zhen was ranked 4th on the phenomenon ranking and had a solid foundation. Coupled with the protection of world-cleansing Qinglian, he fought against the Rakshasas but it was difficult to determine a victor. Ji Qingtian, Leng Ro, and the others could barely protect themselves. As for Xiaoning, Qing, and the others, they were surrounded by danger the moment they exchanged blows and were already half a step into the gates of hell. Xiaoning was a disciple of Elixir Yang sect. In terms of elixir refinement, she was the best among her peers. However, her combat strength was not outstanding, let alone against the Rakshasas. Clang! The curved saber of the Rakshasa transformed into a cold beam of light and almost sliced Xiaoning's throat. However, it was repelled by 5 fingernails that extended from the side. The fingernails were incomparably sharp like blades and shone with a dark light. When they collided against the curved saber of the Rakshasa, sparks were produced. Night Spirit. Night Spirit broke free from the attacks of the Rakshasas behind him. Unknowingly, he had arrived beside Xiaoning stealthily and saved her. "Stand behind me." Night Spirit did not waste time and said quickly before standing in front of Xiaoning. The Rakshasas that were initially chasing after Xiaoning were enraged when they saw their prey escape and charged towards Night Spirit. At the same time, the Rakshasas that were fighting against Night Spirit closed in as well. Two Rakshasas attacked at the same time. Night Spirit's expression was cold and his movement technique was agile. He flashed continuously on the spot like a phantom and left behind afterimages. He was not disadvantaged even against two opponents. Good, you're quite capable to be able to defend against two Rakshasas. The Rakshasa leader crossed his arms and smirked coldly. Although Qing possessed wings as well, she was far inferior compared to the speed of the Rakshasas. Poof! A flash of blood appeared. In less than 3 breaths, Qing was already injured. Although it was not a fatal injury, the wound bled endlessly. Qing's face was pale and she had already lost her balance, swaying in midair. Die! The Rakshasa had an excited expression as he roared and slashed down with his saber. Swash! A figure flashed and rescued Qing from the Rakshasa's curved saber. It was Night Spirit again. After Night Spirit rescued Qing, he fought against 3 Rakshasas. No matter how the 3 Rakshasas made use of their terrifying movement techniques and changed their angles to attack, Night Spirit could neutralize and defend against them one by one. The 3 Rakshasas failed time after time and they even had a few more wounds on their bodies. The Rakshasa leader's expression darkened as he glared at Night Spirit on the battlefield without saying anything. Night Spirit's situation attracted the attention of the 3 Jining Zhenjuan as well. Perfected Lord Luo Shui asked in shock, what sort of spirit beast is that? Its movement speed doesn't seem to be inferior to the Rakshasa race. I'm afraid that's not all. Monkey Lu shook his head and said deeply, don't forget, that spirit beast has yet to revert to his true form. In other words, his combat strength is far from his peak right now. Perfected Lord Yujun frowned slightly and did not say anything. He was wondering why. Why was Night Spirit not reverting to his true form at this point? He seemed to be enduring. What was he worried about? Ah! Suddenly, a series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Little Fox had failed to bewitch the Rakshasas and was saved by Night Spirit at the brink of death. The Rakshasa race had a noble bloodline and possessed extremely frightening inheritance memories, cultivation techniques and secret skills. How could they be bewitched by Little Fox so easily? At that moment, Night Spirit was already fighting 1 against 4. In less than 10 breaths, 3 of them had already been defeated. Furthermore, the situation of the others was not looking good either and their lives were in danger at any moment. Although Ji Qingtian was on the phenomenon ranking, he was at the bottom. Against the relentless attacks of the Rakshasa race, he finally could not hold on any longer and his phenomenon shattered. A cold glint appeared. By the time Ji Qingtian reacted to it, it had already arrived. It was too fast. Heis! Ji Qingtian closed his eyes and sighed internally. Clang! Suddenly, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Brother Ji, back down. I'll help you. Lin Xuanji waved the folding fan in his hands and repelled the Rakshasa curved saber, saving Ji Qingtian. His blood qi and spirit energy burst forth as he fought against the 2 Rakshasas. The disciples of Enigma Palace had never participated in the fight for the phenomenon ranking. Nobody knew of their strength. At that moment, many cultivators finally witnessed Lin Xuanji's capabilities. This was the true paragon of the human race. Even against the Rakshasa race, he did not back down and did not back down at all. Chapter 766. Poof! 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 The talismans in midair danced densely with spirit lights flying everywhere. However, they could not defend against the curved sabers of the Rakshasa race. Leng Ro's protection talisman was penetrated before long. Shoo! In the nick of time, a pink ribbon tore through the air and saved Leng Ro by a hair's breadth. The other end of the ribbon was in Demoness Ji's hands. Leng Ro's face was pale as she said softly, "Thank you. Demoness, you think you can take on 2 people single-handedly with your strength?" The Rakshasa that was chasing Leng Ro shifted his target to Demoness Ji with cold expressions. Boom! The 2 Rakshasas attacked at the same time. Demoness Ji's Jin Dan phenomenon could not withstand it and dissipated instantly. Without the protection of the Jin Dan phenomenon, even paragons such as Ren Tu and Pang Yu, who were in the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking, could not defend against the attacks of the Rakshasa race. One swoosh. Swoosh. 2 figures tore through the air. Initially, a look of panic flashed through Demoness Ji's face. However, she composed herself quickly and a demonic glint shone in the depths of her beautiful eyes. Right in front of everyone, Demoness Ji released an extremely strange movement technique. Tapping her toes on the ground, her footsteps were light and her figure shuttled through streaks of cold light. She was completely unharmed. The speed and movement techniques of the Rakshasa race had already reached a shocking level. It was already extremely fortunate for the cultivators present to be able to withstand 2 or 3 moves. However, Demoness Ji's movement technique managed to avoid the killing moves of the 2 Rakshasas perfectly. Not only that, Demoness Ji did not seem flustered against the pursuit of the 2 Rakshasas, and there was an indescribable beauty to her movement technique. The pink figure seemed to be dancing on the edge of a blade and was incomparably breathtaking. "There's something strange about that movement technique," Perfected Lord Luo Shui said softly. Perfected Lord Yu Jun pondered for a moment before raising his head and exclaiming, "That's the Heavenly Fiend Dance." Ah! The words Heavenly Fiend Dance caused a series of exclamations. Legend has it that the Heavenly Fiend Dance was the secret skill that made Fairy Ling Long famous. With this movement technique, even though Fairy Ling Long had yet to become an emperor, she was still invincible against the attacks of an emperor. It was even said that there were emperors who were willing to follow Fairy Ling Long after witnessing her heavenly demon dance. This was the most famous secret technique of the ancient times. Even though the Enigma Palace was founded by Fairy Ling Long, the secret art was not passed down. To think that the Heavenly Fiend Dance would appear on Demoness Ji. There's no mistake. Perfected Lord Yu Jun said in a deep voice, "When the human emperor's palace appeared 20 years ago, this pure maiden of the fiend's sex entered it as well. She should have learned the Heavenly Fiend Dance in the human emperor's palace." This didn't seem like a movement technique at all. It really looked like a dance. Demoness Ji's figure was graceful as she moved gracefully. Her skirt fluttered and revealed her figure perfectly, exuding a soul-stirring beauty. The biting cold saber light repeatedly brushed past this figure, missing by a hair's breadth. As time passed by, Demoness Ji's dance became more proficient and an invisible aura gradually formed around her. The aura enveloped the 2 Rakshasas within. The 2 Rakshasas were flustered and their movement techniques slowed down, as though they were stuck in a swamp. Humph! The Rakshasa leader harumphed coldly with a darkened expression. Initially, he thought that his clansmen would be able to crush the dozen odd ants before him within 10 breaths. To think that they would encounter some trouble instead. "Do you need our Protoss to help you?" The Protoss leader glanced sideways and asked with a smile. The Rakshasa leader grit his teeth. "There's no need." On the other side, Linghu's massive body was sent flying by a single punch from the Protoss, and he rolled dozens of feet on the ground in a wretched manner. Linghu's head swelled and he could no longer remember if this was the 5th or 6th time. At that moment, he was already covered in injuries. He was completely defeated in terms of speed and strength. He was no match for them at all. If not for the fact that Linghu's palm was fused with the claws of the tiger race's divine spirit after the astral dragon sputum lair incident and was reborn, his body would have been destroyed by the Protoss long ago. Linghu felt that he had reached his limit after holding on for so long. Roar! Linghu growled deeply and struggled to stand up. However, he fell to his knees with a thud. "It's over." The Protoss strode over and extended his arm, smashing down on Linghu's massive head. If that punch connected, a bloody hole would definitely appear on Linghu's forehead. All of a sudden, a ghostly shadow appeared out of thin air and extended its arm, clenching it into a fist and colliding violently with the Protoss's fist. You don't know what's good for you. The Protoss did not manage to catch sight of the intruder and merely scoffed in disdain. No matter who it was, anyone who dared to clash head-on with the Protoss in close-quarters combat was courting death. The Protoss activated his golden blood chi and became no different from a god. His aura skyrocketed, and the surface of his fist even surged with the sound of waves. Bam! The fists collided. The collision of flesh and bones was like leather being beaten, and a muffled sound could be heard. The Protoss's expression froze, and the disdain in his eyes instantly disappeared. He frowned as if he was in great pain and staggered back 3 steps. The Protoss was actually forced back in a head-on confrontation. Everyone focused their gazes and was dumbfounded. Night Spirit. At some point, Night Spirit had actually escaped the siege of the 4 Rakshasas and ran over here. He forced the Protoss back with one punch and saved Linghu. You're courting death. The Protoss was furious and charged toward Night Spirit. At the same time, the 4 Rakshasas had also arrived. Now, Night Spirit's opponents had become the 4 Rakshasas and the Protoss. And he still did not show any signs of defeat. The Protoss leader narrowed his eyes, and his gaze flickered. This was something worth pondering. What was this thing? It was not inferior to the Rakshasas in speed and not inferior to the Protoss in strength. Almost at the same time, the Protoss leader and the Rakshasas leader looked at each other. The Protoss leader smiled and asked, "Have you figured out the background of this black-clothed man?" The Rakshasas leader was expressionless as he said coldly, "Who cares what it is? At worst, I'll kill it myself and end it once and for all." That's true. The Protoss leader nodded and said, "Although this black-clothed man's speed and strength are not bad, he's still a far cry from you and me." While the 2 leaders were chatting, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed. Finally, the Golden Lion could not hold on any longer and was slashed across the back by the Rakshasas, almost slicing it into 2. It fell to the ground with heavy injuries, bleeding profusely and fainting on the spot. Xiaoning rushed over hurriedly. Night Spirit frowned slightly as a violent and murderous glint flashed through his deep eyes before disappearing instantly. Roar! Monkey stood in front of the Golden Lion and his eyes shone with a scarlet light. He let out a deafening roar and entered a berserk state. His blood-red eyes seemed to contain an endless amount of power. Monkey, who had entered a berserk state, triggered a power deep within his bloodline. His physical strength and speed increased exponentially and he was almost irrational, the only thought in his mind was to kill. Furthermore, he could not feel any pain on his body. Among the 7 of them, apart from Night Spirit and Su Zimo, Monkey was the strongest. A berserk monkey was even scarier. Chapter 767. Exclamation point. The Rakshas's curved saber pierced deeply into Monkey's chest, less than half an inch away from his heart. As though he could not feel any pain, Monkey glared with bloodshot eyes without any reduction in ferocity and reached out with his thick arm to grab the Rakshasa before him. The Rakshasa reacted extremely quickly and wanted to withdraw his curved saber right away to soar into the air. However, the curved saber was stuck in Monkey's flesh and bones and paused for a moment. Get down! Right then, Monkey's palm had already grabbed the Rakshasa's wings and yanked him down from midair. Boom! There was a deafening sound. The Rakshasa was pulled by Monkey's wings and slammed heavily onto the ground, creating a huge pit with sand and gravel flying everywhere. The fall was extremely heavy and the Rakshasa shrieked tragically. His blood chi was scattered and his bones were about to fall apart. Ga-ga-ga! Monkey burst into laughter and grabbed the Rakshasa's wings with one hand. Swinging his arm, he yanked the Rakshasa out of the pit and smashed him to the other side. Bang! 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 3 consecutive smashes. The Rakshasa was covered in injuries and was on the brink of death. This was the Rakshasa race with a terrifying bloodline. If it was any other living being, they would have been smashed into meat paste long ago. A cold beam of light appeared silently. Another Rakshasa rushed over. Although Monkey was in a berserk state and had lost his rationality, his reflexes were extremely sharp. He lowered his body and curled his initially tall body into a ball. That transformation was extremely agile and allowed him to dodge the Rakshasa's sure kill slash. Monkey did not stop at all. Suddenly, his body sprung apart and he charged towards the Rakshasa as though he was holding an immortal fruit. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Crackle. After curling his massive body, Monkey suddenly sprung apart. His tendons quivered and his bones buzzed, releasing an incomparably domineering power. The Rakshasa's movement technique was way too fast and it was already impossible for him to dodge that move. Bang! Monkey's hands slammed heavily onto the Rakshasa's chin. Snap! The jarring sound of bones cracking could be heard. The Rakshasa's ferocious head was flung backward. His chin had already been shattered by this heavy blow. Monkey darted forward and stuck close to the Rakshasa. His arms sank and his elbows were like a pair of spears, stabbing into the Rakshasa's chest. Poochie! The Rakshasa's body fell to the ground with 2 bloody holes in his chest. His heart was pierced and he died on the spot. The crowd was in an uproar. The battlefield changed rapidly. Nobody expected that in the blink of an eye, the 2 Rakshasas who initially had the upper hand would end up with one dead and the other injured. This was the first time the Rakshasa tribe had suffered such a heavy blow after entering Wanxiang City. Although the cultivators present did not dare to resist, they were secretly cheering in their hearts. There are more than 100,000 Heaven's favorites, but not many of them dare to step out. They can't even compare to these beasts. How pitiful. Perfected Lord Yujun's heart turned cold. So what if he killed a Rakshasa in front of him? It still wouldn't change the outcome. As long as the Protoss and Rakshasa commanders took action, they would be able to crush everything in their path. No one would be able to leave this place alive. At this moment, the 2 figures that were entangled together suddenly separated. Dugujian staggered with a pale face and was drenched in sweat. It was clear that he was exhausted and was at his limits, unable to fight any longer. However, the Rakshasa opposite him stood there motionlessly with a calm expression. A moment later, the glint in the Rakshasa's eyes dimmed gradually. Everyone focused their gazes. A sinister shade of scarlet appeared on the glabella of the Rakshasa. It grew clearer and eventually, a drop of blood seeped out. It was a fatal sword wound. The Rakshasa's head was pierced. The sword was so fast that the wound closed instantly, resulting in such a sinister scene. Another Rakshasa was dead. In reality, Dugujian was injured and was suppressed by the Rakshasa the entire time. However, Monkey's battle earlier on caused the Rakshasa to be slightly distracted. Dugujian focused on the Tao of the sword and had no distractions. His sword heart was clear and he was extremely sensitive to the outside world, he caught that fleeting opening right away. A single sword kill. Although the Rakshasa was fast, his sword was even faster. Although it was only a single sword strike, it displayed the terrifying killing intent of the Tao of the sword to its fullest. That single sword strike seemed to be telling everyone that even the primordial 9 races were not immortal and could die, they could not defend against the sharpness of the Tao of the sword. After losing 2 of his clansmen in succession, the Rakshasa leader's expression was extremely grim. Good sword, good sword. The Rakshasa leader clapped with a cold gaze. Initially, I was still considering if I should let you guys live. Yes, but now, I've made my decision. The Rakshasa leader said word by word with a murderous aura, none of you paragons of the human race can dream of leaving Myriad Phenomenon City alive. Going back on your words and going back on your words. Xiaoning glared and pointed at Dugujian and Monkey, shouting, they clearly won. going back on my words? The Rakshasa leader glanced sideways at Xiaoning and sneered, I'm the one who set the rules. I can do whatever I want. Ants like you guys don't have the right to negotiate with me. I'm going to bury all of you paragons on the phenomenon ranking here. The Jin Dan phenomenon ranking is the greatest joke of the human race. From this day forth, the phenomenon ranking will become history. Nobody spoke and the atmosphere was stifling. It was as the Rakshasa leader had said. If all the paragons on the phenomenon ranking were to die here and more than 100,000 paragons were to be buried here, the phenomenon ranking would become the greatest humiliation of the cultivation world. Even if the phenomenon ranking was created by Fairy Ling Long and had been passed down since the ancient era, Enigma Palace would not have the face to continue holding it. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you. Dugu Jian said coldly, the number 1 and number 2 of the phenomenon ranking have already left Myriad Phenomenon City a long time ago. Those are the true paragons of the human race, monster incarnates that can compare to the human emperor. I'm merely number 7 on the phenomenon ranking, but I'm able to kill the Rakshasa race. If those 2 monster incarnates were here, you foreign races wouldn't be able to act so arrogantly. The 2 monster incarnates that Dugu Jian was referring to were Su Zimo and Di Yin. He. The Rakshasa leader sneered, paragons? Monster incarnates? Those 2 are probably scared out of their wits and don't dare to return, right? These words spoke the thoughts of many cultivators, and they all agreed with him. If they were in Myriad Phenomenon City's shoes and saw such a change, they would definitely avoid it instead of entering the city. If even Jining Jinjuan had to avoid it and choose to flee, what were the paragons on the phenomenon ranking? Right now, the situation was clear, Myriad Phenomenon City was a living hell and anyone who barged in could forget about leaving alive. The Rakshasa leader rubbed his chin and laughed menacingly. If those 2 dare to return, I'll give them a chance to live and make them my spirit beast slaves. Kill them. The Rakshasa leader waved his hand and dozens of tall figures appeared behind him, transforming into dark streaks of light that lunged towards Monkey and the others. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 revealed pained expressions. They could naturally tell that Monkey and the others were already at their wits' end, there was no way they could defend against the attacks of dozens of Rakshasas. Ah! Right at this moment, a long howl came from the distant horizon. It pierced through gold and cracked stone, rushing straight into the clouds. Everyone was shocked. Ah! The moment the first howl sounded, a second howl sounded. The second howl was even closer. Chapter 768. The intruder did not conceal his tracks at all and headed straight for Myriad Phenomenon City. Furthermore, he was shockingly fast. The first howl was still far away, but the second howl was already approaching Myriad Phenomenon City. Many Rakshasas paused and turned towards the sound. Little Fatty and the others were invigorated when they heard that sound. Perfected Lord Yujun and the others were slightly stunned at first. Thereafter, they seemed to have recalled something and could not help but stand up. Many cultivators were confused. Most of them were unfamiliar with that howl. They truly could not understand who would barge into Myriad Phenomenon City to their deaths given the circumstances. Could it be someone from the primordial 9 races? Not long after, a figure sprinted in from outside the city with green robes fluttering loudly. Ah! When they got closer, everyone focused their gazes and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Su Zimo. The intruder was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking this time round, the person who cultivated 3 Jin Dan phenomenons, suppressed Di Yin domineeringly and dared to fight against Jining Jinjuan, Su Zimo. Everyone was shocked. Even Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 were shocked. They had not expected that Su Zimo would choose to return after leaving Myriad Phenomenon City and avoiding this calamity by chance. He's definitely worthy of being the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. Dugu Jian said those words slowly. That sort of guts was worthy of being the number 1 of the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking. That was the boldness that the number one perfected being should have. Little Fatty and the others could not help but cheer when they saw Su Zimo return. Although the remaining 50,000 odd cultivators did not cheer, they were much more excited and regained some of their vigor. The Rakshasa leader and Protoss leader could sense the change in emotions of the cultivators before them clearly. The Protoss leader had an indifferent expression and retracted his gaze after glancing at Su Zimo. He had seen and killed way too many paragons and monster incarnates like this. This person looked ordinary and nothing special. He was already unperturbed. The Rakshasa leader stuck out his scarlet tongue and licked his lips. Glaring at Su Zimo's figure, he sniffed carefully and murmured in an intoxicated manner, to think that there's such superior flesh in the human race. How rare. After Su Zimo entered Wanxiang City, his face was frighteningly gloomy. Wanxiang City was almost dyed blood red with corpses strewn everywhere. It was a ghastly sight. These cultivators died miserably. Many of the corpses were incomplete, and there were obvious signs that they had been bitten and devoured. When he came closer and saw the wounds on Little Fatty and the others, the killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes became even more intense. It was so intense that it almost materialized and gushed out. Su Zimo swept his gaze across the crowd and paused momentarily on perfected Lord Yujun and the other two. The situation was worse than he had imagined. More than half of the dozen Jining Jinjuan had perished. Finally, Su Zimo's gaze landed on Nian Qi. Initially, Nian Qi's head was lowered and she did not say anything the entire time, nor did she acknowledge Qing Qing and the others. She was worried that they would be implicated because of her. However, when she sensed Su Zimo's gaze, Nian Qi could no longer hold it in. Instantly, all the grievances in her heart surged and she cried out in tears, "Young master! Don't cry, I'll save you." Su Zimo's voice was gentle. Yes. Nian Qi held back her tears and nodded vigorously. The Protoss leader could not help but laugh when he heard that. His eyes were filled with mockery as he remarked leisurely, "If I were you, I'd think about how to save myself instead." The other 6 Protoss crossed their arms and roared in laughter. When Su Zimo came closer, many cultivators gradually noticed something amiss. The spirit energy in his body seems to have been depleted. That's right, I felt it too. How is he going to fight against the Rakshasa and Protoss like this? I heard that he's extremely strong in melee combat and can even take on demon form. What's the use of demon form? What demon race can compare to the primordial 9 races? Can he take on Jining Jinjuan in demon form? Those 2 leaders of the other races can even kill Jining Jinjuan. Many cultivators discussed softly and their spirits were dampened once more. Everyone could tell that Su Zimo was in a terrible state. Su Zimo's spirit energy was almost depleted after the huge battle with Di Yin. He traveled a long distance without resting. By the time he returned to Myriad Phenomenon City, there was even a hint of hardship in his eyes. "Zimo, hurry and leave. Don't bother about us." Right then, perfected Lord Luo Shui's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. She was using her essence spirit to send a voice transmission to Su Zimo. Notwithstanding the fact that your spirit energy is depleted and you can't release the Jin Dan phenomenon, even if you were in your peak condition, you might not be a match for the 2 leaders of the Protoss and Rakshasa race. Perfected Lord Yujun sent a voice transmission. As the leader of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects, you're the future hope of the human race. As long as you don't die, you'll definitely achieve something one day. It's impossible for a single person to save the day. Today is a foregone conclusion. There's no need for you to force yourself or blame yourself. This is fate. Monk Yin Lu sighed gently. Patron Su, hurry and escape. Su Zimo remained silent. However, his expression was frighteningly cold. Even if not for Little Fatty and the others and Nian Qi, Su Zimo would not have left today. He was displeased. Ever since he entered Myriad Phenomenon City, he had been suppressing a grudge in his heart that he could not vent. He couldn't just stand by and watch the humans being bullied and slaughtered by the outsiders like this. This was Myriad Phenomenon City, the sacred ground of the human race. He cultivated the Tao techniques of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects and cultivated the secret skills of the human emperor, becoming the #1 of the phenomenon ranking. If he were to escape today, how could he face the human emperor and Fairy Ling Long? Escape? At that moment, the Rakshasa leader suddenly chuckled and said faintly, "The three of you old fogies still want him to escape? Can he escape?" The expressions of perfected Lord Yujun and the other two changed. Their voice transmission using their spirit consciousness could not escape the detection of the Rakshasa race. Indeed, the primordial 9 races had many unimaginable methods that were impossible to guard against. "I've never thought of escaping." Suddenly, Su Zimo turned around with a calm expression. He looked at the many Rakshasas not far away and said slowly, "I'm not cultivating for the sake of escaping either. I want to get rid of the injustice in my heart. I want my thoughts to be clear and I want to repay my debts of gratitude. I want all of you foreign races to be buried with me." At the end of his sentence, Su Zimo's tone turned more intense and murderous. His voice reverberated through the voids like a bell. "I want you guys to know that this is the sacred ground of the human race and you're not to be blasphemed. Trespassers of foreign races shall be killed. Kill without mercy." The moment he said that, Blood Quencher had already appeared in Su Zimo's hands. The saber buzzed and a blood beam shone brightly. "Aunt, you must have a death wish." The Rakshasa leader was enraged and his eyes shone fiercely. "There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I'll kill this man for you, leader." A Rakshasa appeared in a flash and spread his wings, transforming into a dark streak of light that charged towards Su Zimo at a shocking speed. "Kill!" Su Zimo did not dodge or retreat. Circulating his inner core, he charged forward and hollered. Thunderclap Kill was a secret skill. The power of his voice burst forth instantly. The Rakshasa paused for a moment and the blood beam had already engulfed him with nowhere to hide. Clang! The curved saber and Blood Quencher collided violently. That slash was an attack by Su Zimo that was filled with rage. As for the Rakshasa, his blood chi was almost dispersed by the sudden burst of Thunderclap Kill and he was at his weakest state. One was weakened while the other was strengthened. Victory was decided with a single slash. Chapter 769. The dark light paused and revealed the Rakshasa's figure. Poof! The Rakshasa spat out a mouthful of blood with a pale expression. His palm was torn and dripping with blood, he could not even hold on to his curved saber and send it flying. "I'll escape first. This man is too strong. I can't fight him head-on. I've got to deal with him and find another opportunity." The Rakshasa reacted extremely quickly and those thoughts flashed through his mind. Swoosh! The Rakshasa's meat wings flapped and the wind howled as he released a tremendous amount of power, wanting to soar into the air and escape. Under normal circumstances, there would definitely be a pause in strength after a head-on clash. However, Su Zimo's body rumbled with the sound of tidal waves. Initially, he was exhausted but suddenly, he felt a regenerative power that surged like a tidal wave. That was tidal might. Su Zimo's expression was cold and he did not stop moving at all. Making use of the power of tidal might, he closed in and his saber aura spun. The saber vibrated gently, as though it was creating a series of blood-colored ripples in the void. The blood-colored ripples swiped across the Rakshasa's throat gently. The two slashes, one firm and one soft, did not seem to have any pauses and were as smooth as flowing water. The Rakshasa's tall body could not break free from the range of Su Zimo's saber aura at all. Poof! A gigantic pillar of blood spewed out. A menacing head was tossed high into the air, splattering with fresh blood. The Rakshasa's headless corpse fell to the ground limply and twitched unconsciously. Suddenly, the battlefield went silent. Nobody expected this to be the outcome of the fight between the Rakshasa and Suzimo. More than that, nobody expected the Rakshasa to be killed by Suzimo with 2 slashes. To others, the process was short and simple. However, nobody knew that Suzimo had used at least 3 trump cards to kill the Rakshasa before him. The Rakshasa's death was not unjust. The Rakshasa leader glared at Suzimo with a cold gaze and said slowly, "Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. I'll torture you bit by bit and make you wish you were dead." The Rakshasa leader's smile turned even more sinister as he waved his hand. "Tie him up and kill the rest. Leave no one alive." "Understood." The many Rakshasas behind him agreed in unison. "During the battle, I might not be able to take care of you. Everyone, be careful." Suzy glanced sideways and reminded Little Fatty and the others. This battle was unprecedentedly dangerous. Even Suzimo did not have the slightest confidence. Not to mention the Rakshasa commanders and Protoss commanders who could kill Jinjinjuan, just the 100 or so Rakshasas attacking at the same time would be very difficult to deal with. Night Spirit's expression changed, and his eyes flickered. After a while, Night Spirit seemed to have made a decision. "Big brother, I'll fight alongside you in a while." Night Spirit did not say anything. However, his voice rang out in Suzimo's mind. After all, the Night Spirit was only a Jin Dan spiritual beast, but it actually knew the secret sound transmission technique that only Jinjinjuan could release. Suzimo looked at Night Spirit deeply. He was almost certain that there was a secret in Night Spirit's body. Furthermore, it was a secret that could not be exposed. Previously, Night Spirit was fighting against the Rakshasas and even took on 4 or 5 of them single-handedly. However, at that moment, the words "fight alongside you" seemed to carry an unusual meaning when they came out of Night Spirit's mouth. Kill. Many Rakshasas flashed and dozens of dark streaks of light scattered through the voids, charging towards Suzimo from all directions and arriving instantly. Even Jinjinjuan might not be able to escape unscathed from such an attack. However, Suzimo's expression was calm as he brandished Blood Quencher and released the saber techniques of the Sea Calming Manual and Shura one after another. The saber force was continuous and airtight, making it difficult for water to penetrate. The Rakshasas were intelligent and extremely talented in combat. When they realized how strong Suzimo was, they naturally would not take him head-on and merely circled around him repeatedly. On the battlefield, Suzimo's figure was almost nowhere to be seen as he was shrouded by a blood beam that formed a gigantic blood-colored barrier of light. In the skies, streaks of dark light danced and charged repeatedly, trying to break through the defense of the blood-colored barrier but to no avail. If this drags on, Suzimo will be at a disadvantage. That's right. Suzimo has to expend a lot of stamina and focus to release that saber technique, and he doesn't dare to slack off at all. However, the Rakshasas are merely hovering in midair, biding their time, and are almost invincible. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 revealed worried expressions and were anxious. If Suzimo could not break out of this situation, he would most likely be exhausted to death. On the other side, more than 30 Rakshasas lunged towards Little Fatty's group. Everyone had grim expressions. Suzimo could defend against the attacks of dozens of Rakshasas. However, each of them could only defend against 1 or 2 Rakshasas, that was their limit. Furthermore, just now, Linghu was severely injured in the exchange. Monkey released his bloodshot eye and his berserk state was already gone. His strength was weakened and his chest was severely injured, he could barely fight anymore. There were only a handful of people who could truly defend against the Rakshasas. Their situation was not much better than Suzimo's. Little Fatty, Lin Xuanji and Demonis Ji stood out and shielded everyone with resolute gazes, they were prepared to die. Monkey, Linghu, and the other demon beasts struggled to stand up fearlessly as well. The 50,000-odd cultivators had conflicted expressions as they looked at the figures before them. There was a hint of shame in the depths of their eyes. They were known as paragons, but now, they were scared out of their wits by the foreign races and even had to rely on these demon beasts to protect them. For the first time, everyone felt that they were ashamed of the title of paragons. More than 30 Rakshasas swooped over with an unstoppable might, as though they could rip everything in front of them into shreds. Against that pressure, Little Fatty and the other two broke out in cold sweat. They were extremely tense and even their arms were trembling. Their Jin Dan phenomenons had already dissipated. Although the heavenly fiend dance was Fairy Ling Long's secret skill, it could not defend against the attacks of so many Rakshasas. Although Lin Xuanji had many methods, he felt a sense of despair at that moment as well. He was powerless. All of a sudden, just as the three of them were about to give up, a phantom-like figure charged out from behind them and collided with more than 30 Rakshasas without slowing down at all. Ah! A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Who was it? Who was that? Did he have a death wish? Was he trying to use his body to delay the onslaught of the Rakshasas? That was way too laughable. Just as many cultivators were letting their imaginations run wild, the figure had already collided with more than 30 Rakshasas. Exclamation point. Almost at the instant of collision, a blood mist filled the air. The figure vanished completely, as though it was smashed into meat paste. However, the next moment, the crowd was in an uproar. In mid-air, a corpse actually fell down. It was the corpse of a Rakshasa. There were 5 holes in the head of the corpse with foul-smelling brain juice flowing from them. The Rakshasa was already dead. Many cultivators were dumbfounded and their minds were in a mess. None of them could figure out what was going on. In midair, the figure that had initially vanished reappeared once more. Like a phantom, it swept past a Rakshasa and reached out with its palm at a frightening speed. Snap! The Rakshasa's throat was crushed by the palm and he died on the spot, losing all signs of life. It's Night Spirit! Ching Ching exclaimed. A massacre descended in the night. Chapter 770. In less than 3 breaths, 2 Rakshasas were killed consecutively. Many cultivators held their breaths as they stared at the scene in disbelief. As one of the primordial 9 races, the Rakshasas had a noble bloodline and were born with a pair of meat wings. Their movement techniques were agile and all the cultivators present had experienced how terrifying the Rakshasas were. But now, 2 Rakshasas were dead just like that. In fact, they died without knowing how they died. Even Monkey, Linghu, and the others who had watched Night Spirit grow up and were now sworn brothers of Night Spirit were shocked, let alone the other cultivators. Although they knew that Night Spirit was strong, they did not expect him to be this frightening. More than 30 Rakshasas charged over at the same time and 2 of them were dead in a single exchange. Such methods, such combat strength, had already reached a world-shocking level. Seems like my defeat wasn't for nothing, the Golden Lion mumbled. It had suffered a setback the first time it met Night Spirit. Initially, the lion wanted to cultivate diligently in the future and have a chance to get back at Night Spirit. But now, that thought had vanished without a trace. The 3 Jinying Jinjuan exchanged glances and could see the shock and confusion in each other's eyes. Others might not have been able to see the fight clearly. However, the 3 of them possessed spirit consciousnesses and could roughly capture the process of Night Spirit fighting against more than 30 Rakshasas. Stunning, perfect, and terrifying. Night Spirit was decisive and ruthless in his attacks without any hesitation or sloppiness. A one-hit kill. Throughout the entire process, the first reaction the 3 of them had was amazement. Be it the timing, angle, movement technique, speed, burst of power or choice of target, everything was perfect. There were no flaws at all. However, the more they thought about the process, the more horrified they felt. Even if the 3 of them were in their peak conditions, they might not be able to escape unscathed against Night Spirit's attacks. Night Spirit was practically born to kill. His body faintly emitted an aura that was pure and ancient, dark and cold, causing one to feel uneasy and tremble with fear. At their current cultivation realm, perfected Lord Yujun and the other two had broken free from the shackles of heaven and earth and had a lifespan of 1,000 years. They would not feel that way even when facing the Rakshasa race. But now, when the three of them sensed Night Spirit's aura, they were somewhat flustered. Just as the three Jinjinjuan's thoughts were running wild, another Rakshasa fell from the sky. There was a bloody hole in his chest, and his heart was shattered. Night Spirit's figure was like a ghost. Under the cover of the night, it was as if there was no trace, faintly discernible. While the attacks of more than 30 Rakshasas were fierce, Night Spirit was always able to find a gap in their attacks and dodge them while waiting for a chance to counterattack. The Protoss commander originally had the intention of watching the show and coldly watched from the sidelines. However, at this moment, the Protoss commander frowned and stared at the figure of the Night Spirit. His eyes flickered and he seemed to be deep in thought. The Rakshasa commander's expression was frighteningly grim. At the same time, a change happened on another battlefield as well. Om. Ma. Ni. Pa. Mi. Om. 6 Sanskrit sounds descended like a huge bell and reverberated through the world. The Sanskrit sounds contained the supreme might of the Buddhist monasteries. The Daming mantra of the 6 words. The lost ultimate skill of Daming Monastery had reappeared in Myriad Phenomenon City. The power of a single Sanskrit sound was enough to shake the hearts of cultivators. The 6 Sanskrit sounds burst forth at the same time and shook the world, causing the weather to change. In fact, rumbling thunder could even be heard from the ends of the firmaments. At that moment, many cultivators outside the battlefield could feel their blood chi fluctuating and their hearts skipped a beat. However, the dozens of Rakshasas on the battlefield merely paused for a moment. Their bloodlines were way too strong. Although the Daming mantra was strong, it did not have much of an impact on them. Right then, Su Zimo attacked. Slash! With a loud roar, the blood color that surrounded Su Zimo retracted instantly and gathered on the blood quencher in his hands. Immediately after, a blood beam tore through the horizons. Su Zimo's blood chi burst forth and his black hair danced wildly. Wielding blood quencher, he drew a gigantic blood-colored semicircle in midair, almost slicing the world into two. Poof! Poof! At least 10 Rakshasas were struck by the blood beam. There was no way they could defend against such a terrifying power. 3 Rakshasas were sliced into 2 on the spot and the curved sabers in their hands were shattered by blood quencher. Although the remaining Rakshasas managed to defend against the sharpness of blood quencher, they could not defend against the impact of the power. Coughing out blood, their gazes dimmed as they were sent flying, severely injured on the ground. Clang! Clang! After being refined in the backyard of Dragon Burial Valley, blood quencher had already turned into a ferocious weapon. Now that it had drunk the blood of the Rakshasas, the saber looked even more frightening and sharp. It gave off a thick blood stench as it trembled excitedly. Set up the formation. Suddenly, the voice of the Rakshasa leader sounded, chilling to the bones. Swoosh! Swoosh! The Rakshasas on both sides of the battlefield withdrew chains made of mystic steel from their storage bags one after another. The Rakshasas formed pairs and tugged at the ends of the chains. Making use of their movement techniques, they circled around Su Zimo in a crisscrossing manner. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he dealt with them carefully, not daring to be careless. The chains were soft. When blood quencher slashed, it felt as though it could not exert any force at all. Su Zimo swung his saber repeatedly but he could not unleash the might of blood quencher. Instead, the space he had to maneuver decreased. Before long, his body was coiled by a chain. Su Zimo frowned. There were actually tiny and sharp thorns hidden on this chain. They were so fine that they were almost undetectable. The spikes were only revealed when the chain coiled around Su Zimo's body and pierced his flesh instantly. Even with Suzumo's strong physique, he could not defend against the sharpness of the spikes. In that brief moment of distraction, another chain coiled around Suzumo's arm twice and restricted the power of Blood Quencher completely. "This is bad," Perfected Lord Luo Shui exclaimed softly. More and more chains coiled around Suzumo's body. The more chains there were, the more difficult it was for Suzumo to break free. Without the threat of Blood Quencher and coupled with the fact that Suzumo was trapped in the formation, the Rakshasas were almost invincible with their agile movement techniques. One after another, chains coiled tightly around Suzumo's arms, thighs, chest and back like anacondas, baring their sharp fangs and biting into his flesh. In the blink of an eye, Suzumo was already trapped in many chains. The Rakshasa leader's expression relaxed as he laughed menacingly. "Ant, why aren't you struggling anymore? This is the heavenly net formation of the Rakshasa race. Even the berserkers of the 9 races won't be able to break free, let alone an ant like you." Dozens of Rakshasas wielded a chain in their hands and stood in midair, looking down at Suzumo with mocking gazes. Fu. Suzumo stood motionlessly on the spot and suddenly laughed. "You want to trap me with just these pieces of scrap metal?" Chapter 771. An inner core circulated slowly in Suzumo's chest, emitting a demonic glow that dyed his chest a blood-red color. One could even vaguely see the beating heart within and his sternum at the side. A terrifying aura spread out. Each time Suzumo breathed, streams of scarlet demonic chi would gush out from his nose and mouth. They circled around his body, turning thicker and purer. Even the dozens of Rakshasas in midair felt a sense of pressure against that aura, let alone the cultivators present. He managed to cultivate an inner core. The Rakshasa leader's eyes lit up. An inner core was akin to a cultivator's gene dan, it contained the essence of a demon beast's cultivation and was also the foundation of all power. An inner core as pure as that was a great supplement for any living being. "Behave yourself." A Rakshasa tugged at the chains furiously, letting out clanging sounds. There were spikes on the chains and the way he tugged at them caused the spikes to stir in his flesh as well, causing him to feel a piercing pain as though his body was being torn apart. Suzumo did not move at all with a cold expression, as though he could not feel the pain on his body. Instead, the ferocious glint in his eyes intensified. "Bastard, kneel down." The dozens of Rakshasas had a tacit understanding and exerted strength at the same time, flapping their wings and tugging at the chains. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of chains were stretched taut and emitted a series of creaking sounds. Many cultivators felt their teeth ache at the sight. It was as though an extreme punishment of the mortal realm was being carried out, being torn apart by 5 horses. However, those 5 horses were replaced by dozens of Rakshasas. The strength of a single Rakshasa was not a match for Suzumo. Dozens of Rakshasas exerted strength at the same time. Even Jinying Jinjuan who specialized in body tempering would be torn to shreds, let alone Suzumo. Pust. 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 Suzumo opened his mouth and began to inhale. A terrifying air current tugged at his throat, letting out a series of sharp sounds as though an ancient heavenly god was pulling on a gigantic bellows. "Break!" Suzumo roared. Accompanied by this roar, the bones and tendons in his body rang out, and his flesh and blood expanded. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Suzumo's body, which was originally only 7 feet tall, suddenly grew to a height of 10 zhang in the blink of an eye. He was like an ancient demon god with a monstrous ferocious aura. Pang pang pang. The many chains wrapped around Suzumo's body were all broken by this huge explosive force. The Protoss commander was shocked, and his expression became serious. The Rakshasa leader's pupils constricted rapidly. Many cultivators gasped and raised their heads to look at the fiend celestial and demon king that rose from the ground. They were dumbfounded and shocked. What kind of concept was a 10 zhang tall body? Of all the cultivators present, the tallest only reached Suzumo's ankle. Green veins protruded from the terrifying and massive body, densely packed together as if countless spirit snakes were crawling on it. It was a terrifying sight. After breaking free from the shackles of the chains, Suzimo was also covered in wounds from the spikes on the chains. Although he was drenched in blood, Suzimo was oblivious to it. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit and killing intent, as though he was a murderous weapon that was soaked in blood. Rumble. Boom. Thunder rumbled in the firmaments in a shocking manner. The awakening of this terrifying ancient demon god seemed to have alarmed the heavens. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled above Suzimo's head as scarlet electric arcs tore through the firmaments. Blazing thunderbolts gathered continuously with a wanton might, as though the end of the world had arrived. Even the expressions of the Rakshasa and god race leaders changed slightly against such a terrifying sight, and they shuddered in fear. That was the true might of heaven and earth. Their bloodlines were strong, they were of noble birth and had inherited many secret skills. However, they were far from cultivating to the point where they could fight against heaven and earth. At that moment, Suzimo's head was in the skies and his feet were on the ground. His black hair danced wildly and his eyes were clear, there was no hint of fear on his face. It was as though he was a god that ruled over heaven and earth. Snap! There was a deafening sound. An incomparably thick thunderbolt descended and struck Suzimo's body. Crackle! Lightning flashed and electric arcs extended. Against the baptism of the terrifying thunderbolt, Suzimo's aura turned even more frightening. Even the thunderbolt could not suppress him. Purple Thunder Manual. It must be the Purple Thunder Manual. A figure sprawled among the corpses on the city wall, carefully concealing his tracks. When he saw that, he could not help but exclaim softly in shock. However, that person reacted quickly and shut up, afraid that he would attract the attention of the factions in the city. As a matter of fact, everyone in Wanxiang City was stunned by the figure bathed in lightning and filled with a demonic aura. No one would notice the top of the city wall. Ah! Suzimo roared and widened his bloodshot demonic eyes. Opening his palms, he blotted out the skies and scooped in midair with his massive palms. Clang! Clang! More than 10 broken chains were gripped tightly in Suzimo's hands. However, the other ends of the chains were gripped by more than 10 Rakshasas who did not have time to retract their hands. The surging power of thunder flowed through the steel chains and surged into the bodies of the Rakshasas instantly. Suzimo's physique could withstand the baptism of the thunderbolt, but the Rakshasas could not. The Rakshasas in midair shuddered and their eyes widened as they spasmed uncontrollably. Before they could recover from their stupor, the Rakshasas suddenly felt their bodies going out of their control as they were pulled down by a tremendous force and plummeted. It was Suzimo who had swung his arms and smashed the chains down heavily. The Rakshasas were smashed into the limestone mud with electricity. Their tendons and bones were broken and their organs were shattered. Their consciousness faded and their life force was severed. That power was way too strong. Coupled with the impact of the power of thunder, the Rakshasas died on the spot. All of you, die. Suzimo was in a killing frenzy and decided to use the chains as weapons. Waving his arms, thick chains that shone with electric arcs tore through the air one after another. The remaining Rakshasas were flustered and turned into streaks of dark light, circling in midair. If there was only a single chain, it would have been difficult for it to hit the rampaging Rakshasas. However, Suzimo wielded more than 10 chains in each hand. When he waved them around, they were almost omnipresent and could not be dodged. The chains intertwined and formed a lightning net. That was a forbidden zone for the Rakshasas. Not only did the chains carry the power of thunder, they also carried the terrifying explosive power of Suzimo after his demon form. Anyone that was struck by the chains would definitely die. The remaining Rakshasas fled in all directions. In fact, they did not even dare to approach, the contempt, mockery in their eyes had long vanished. In its place was shock and fear. On the battlefield, the chains smashed onto the ground with loud thuds. However, it was silent behind Suzumo. More than 50,000 cultivators raised their heads and opened their mouths, as though they had forgotten to breathe. Their minds were blank and their eyes reflected that massive and invincible figure. It was way too shocking. Within Myriad Phenomenon City, that indomitable figure shrouded in scarlet demonic chi caused the ground to quake with every step he took and the weather to change with a single roar. Waving the lightning chains in his arms, he tore through the voids with a domineering aura that shook the universe. Who could fight against him in this world? Chapter 772. On the other side of the battlefield, the Night Spirit was facing the same Empyrean formation. Unlike Suzumo's unstoppable ferocity and torrential might, the way he dealt with it was even more unpredictable and impossible to defend against. More than 30 Rakshasas wielded steel chains, but they could not trap Night Spirit's figure at all. The Night Spirit was even faster and more agile. While avoiding the attacks of the Rakshasas, he was able to find a fleeting opening and kill it forcefully. Night Spirit was like a god of massacre. He was born for massacre. His attacks were all killing moves that were incomparably ferocious. None of the Rakshasas that were struck by him could break free and escape, all of them died without a single exception. When the battle first broke out, many cultivators' attention was attracted by Suzumo's massive body that exuded a terrifying might after he took on his demon form. By the time everyone reacted and looked at the other side of the battlefield, they were shocked to discover that there were only 16 Rakshasas left of the initial 30-odd Rakshasas that were attacking Night Spirit. Night Spirit's massacre did not have a strong visual impact. However, it was filled with wild imagination and was untraceable. By the time the Rakshasa leader regained his senses, more than half of his 100-odd clansmen were dead. ****, I'm going to tear you guys into pieces. The Rakshasa leader shrieked as his eyes nearly popped out. The Protoss leader's gaze was deep as his blood chi rumbled with a golden glow. Rising slowly, he said in a deep voice, "Prepare to attack. We can't leave those two alive. Kill them with all our might." Initially, the Protoss leader merely wanted to watch by the sidelines. However, at that moment, he felt a sense of threat as well. It was clear that the black-robed young man was not human. He merely revealed bits and pieces of his claws from time to time and did not revert to his true form, nor could he tell his background. Even so, that was enough to cause terrifying damage to the Rakshasas. The being before him that was 100 feet tall and had a torrential demonic chi, resembling an ancient peerless demon king, was even more frightening. Humans and demons were different and their body structures, bloodlines and habits were completely different. However, this human managed to cultivate an inner core that only demons could cultivate. Furthermore, he was able to cultivate an inner core to this extent. The demonic chi in its body was purer than any ferocious beast he had ever seen. These two people must be killed. Whoosh! A streak of black light shot through the air. Its speed was astonishingly fast, almost disappearing into the lightning net released by Suzumo. Not to mention Suzumo, even the three Jinying Jinjuan's divine sense could not capture the trajectory of this dark light. It was too fast. This was the speed of a Rakshasa leader. Without this speed, without this reliance, he would never have been able to surpass a realm and kill the top Jinying Jinjuan of the supersets. Suzumo swung his chains. Although the lightning net was dense, it could not stop the Rakshasa leader's footsteps. Puchi! A scarlet light appeared on Suzumo's body, and a rain of blood poured down from the sky. Although his spirit perception warned him, his body expanded 100 feet after his demon form. At the same time as his strength increased, his massive body also made him a bigger target and slower. It was impossible for him to avoid the Rakshasa leader's attack completely. A gigantic wound appeared on Suzumo's chest. His flesh was ripped apart and blood flowed in a frightening manner. Thankfully, he had dodged in advance. Otherwise, there was a high chance that he would have been sliced into two by that slash. Bang! Bang! More than 10 chains tore through the air and smashed down. 2 gigantic pits appeared on the ground. He was a step too late. The Rakshasa leader had already vanished from the spot and dodged far away, standing outside of Su Zimo's attack range. His gaze was cold and he was ready to attack at any moment. Beast, you're far from enough. The Rakshasa leader smiled sinisterly. I'll wear you down bit by bit and you won't even be able to touch my sleeves. Su Zimo's blood chi surged and the bleeding from his wounds slowed down gradually. The regeneration capabilities of his body were way too strong. Even if the curved saber of the Rakshasa race had the effect of tearing open wounds and causing them to bleed non-stop, Su Zimo's regeneration capabilities were enough to negate the negative effects. Even so, Su Zimo was not optimistic. He knew that the true test had only just begun. It was difficult for him to defend against the Rakshasa leader's speed. The only thing he could rely on was his unfathomable spirit perception. At the same time, Su Zimo had to dispel his demon form and weaken his strength in exchange for the agility and speed of his movement technique. That was the only way he could fight. However, on the other side, the Protoss leader had already set his sights on him. Not only that, under the signal of the Protoss leader, apart from one of the Protoss who was guarding Nian Chi, the other 5 Protoss surrounded him as well. The Protoss had no intention of giving him a chance to catch his breath at all. The Protoss leader had no intention of fighting him fairly either. It was clear that he wanted to kill Su Zimo with all his might. If he dispelled his demon form, Su Zimo's strength would weaken and he would definitely be at a disadvantage against the Protoss. He was in a dilemma. Just as Su Zimo was hesitating, the Rakshasa leader sneered. It was clear that he had figured out the situation as well. Swash! The dark light flashed once more. Su Zimo was alarmed. If he were to dispel his demon form right now, he might be able to avoid the ambush of the Rakshasa leader. However, the Protoss would definitely launch a destructive attack against him. All of a sudden, a black shadow flashed like a phantom. Clang! A ferocious claw appeared out of thin air and actually intercepted the black light. The dark light dissipated. The Rakshasa leader revealed himself and retreated swiftly with a wretched expression. There were 5 slashes on his shirt in front of his chest. Just now, his heart would be dug out if he was a step slower. Unknowingly, Night Spirit had managed to break free from the entanglement of more than 10 Rakshasas and blocked the Rakshasa leader in a flash. Bro, leave the Rakshasa to me. You go and deal with the Protoss. Night Spirit said slowly, be careful. The Protoss bloodline is terrifying and they have immense strength. They specialize in melee combat and their inherited spirit arts and secret skills are shockingly powerful. With the help of Night Spirit, Su Zimo was filled with pride. All right. Su Zimo declared loudly, today, let us brothers meet the primordial 9 races. I want to see what makes your bloodline noble. In the ancient era, the experts of the human race defeated the primordial 9 races and banished you guys to a corner of Tianhuang mainland. Today, I, Su Zimo, am still able to suppress you guys. This matter was a humiliation for the primordial 9 races and the Protoss and Rakshasa found it extremely grating. A dark look flashed through the eyes of the Protoss leader. Fufu. However, right after, the Protoss leader scoffed coldly and said mockingly, in the ancient era, there were many experts of the human race and the emperors rose together. Who do you think you are? How dare a mere Jin Dan be mentioned in the same breath as the experts of the ancient era? The era of the human race is over. The ancient emperors are either dead or gone. They have long disappeared from Tianhuang mainland. The Protoss leader pointed with a domineering aura and declared proudly with a confident expression, this world is destined to welcome a new era and a new ruler. The human race will return to being the weakest of the 10,000 races and be enslaved by the 10,000 races once more. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo burst into laughter and charged towards the Protoss leader in huge strides. Every time his massive feet landed on the ground, the entire myriad phenomenon city shook and sand flew everywhere. The ancient emperors are no longer around, but I'm still around. Su Zimo's voice was filled with a domineering aura that looked down on the world as he declared loudly, in the ancient battlefield, I am the emperor. Chapter 773. The emperors may not be here, but I am. In the ancient battlefield, I am the emperor. His voice reverberated through myriad phenomenon city for a long time without dissipating. The blood of many cultivators was ignited. Soaring heroism. Perfected Lord Luo Shui could not help but exclaim. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't even dare to think about it. As expected of the strongest monster incarnate in history and the number one of the phenomenon ranking, perfected Lord Yujun could not conceal the shock in his eyes as well. That charisma and boldness is truly impressive. This lad's future is limitless. We'll have to see the outcome of this battle at the end of the day, Monkey Lu said softly with a worried expression. This lad was already exhausted when he arrived here. Now that he's fighting against the Rakshasa and Protoss, he's in an even worse state. If he can't escape this calamity, Monkey Lu did not continue. If he could not escape this calamity, there would naturally be no future for him. As everyone discussed, apart from the Protoss leader, the other 5 Protoss had already attacked. Bang! 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 There were 5 consecutive explosions. The 5 Protoss had already vanished. A mysterious pyramid-shaped building appeared where they were initially standing. It was golden in color and its base was quadrangular while each side was triangular. The golden pagoda resembled a gigantic, gold, character. The pyramid hovered in midair and shone with a golden light with an unbridled might. At the bottom of the pyramid, there were hundreds of millions of living beings kneeling and worshipping. There was no end in sight. Every single living being knelt on the ground with their palms pressed together. They looked up at the mysterious pyramid above their heads and chanted prayers repeatedly. Golden threads extended from the heads of those living beings and gathered at the top of the pyramid. A single person stood at the top of the pyramid. It was the Protoss of just now. The Protoss spread his arms and his aura rose continuously, as though he was absorbing some sort of power from the countless living beings on the vast land through the pyramid beneath him. 5 mysterious pyramids descended from the void, exuding boundless pressure. The 50,000-odd cultivators below were shocked and their hearts skipped a beat. Facing the 5 pyramids, many cultivators felt a pressure and fear from the depths of their souls. They were unable to resist at all. Many cultivators knelt on the ground with a thud, sweating profusely and trembling in fear. Many cultivators felt as if they had returned to the immemorial era. Witnessing with his own eyes the great era where thousands of races stood in great numbers and worshipped the Protoss. All races, all living beings, must submit to the rule of the Protoss. The human race would not be spared either. This was a suppression that originated from the depths of his ancient memories. Not to mention perfected Jean Dan, even perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 felt their hearts palpitate. Submit, or die. The 5 Protoss spoke at the same time, their voices cold and emotionless. It was like a final warning. It was as if the slightest hesitation would lead to an imminent disaster. Plop. Plop. More and more cultivators knelt on the ground, keeping quiet out of fear. If the cultivators who were not involved in this matter were like this, then one could imagine what kind of pressure Su Zimo, who was in the middle of the 5 mysterious pyramids, was enduring. Streaks of blood had already appeared on the surface of his massive body. The 5 pyramids had yet to truly attack, but Su Zimo's body was already on the verge of exploding. Jean Dan phenomenon. A look of surprise flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Humph. The leader of the Protoss did not move and said proudly with his hands behind his back, "This is not the Jean Dan phenomenon that you ants speak of. This is a bloodline phenomenon inherited by us Protoss. Su Zimo's eyes flickered when he heard the words bloodline phenomenon. He seemed to have thought of something. The leader of the Protoss continued, as long as one possesses the bloodline of a Protoss and grows to a certain age, they will be able to cultivate this phenomenon without the need to cultivate. Powerful. That was the terror of Protoss. They could control the power of phenomenons without the need to cultivate and grow naturally. The purer one's bloodline, the stronger the power of the bloodline phenomenon. The bloodline phenomenons of the 5 Protoss were enough to suppress most of the Jin Dan phenomenons on the phenomenon ranking. Apart from Su Zimo and Di Yin, there was probably no one else who could take on the bloodline phenomenon of the Protoss head-on. He's lost, perfected Lord Yujun's expression darkened as he shook his head. Su Zimo's spirit energy is depleted and he can't release the Jin Dan phenomenon. There's no way he can defend against the attacks of the 5 Protoss. To think that the Protoss did not give him a chance at all and released his bloodline phenomenon the moment he attacked. Monk Yin Lu sighed as well. Something's not right. Perfected Lord Luo Shui frowned slightly and glared at Su Zimo's face, saying softly, there's no hint of panic in his eyes. It seems like he still has a trump card. How is that possible? Perfected Lord Yujun and Monk Yin Lu shook their heads at the same time. Even if Su Zimo had a trump card, he could not defend against the attacks of the Protoss bloodline phenomenons without releasing the Jin Dan phenomenon. Furthermore, 5 bloodline phenomenons were released at the same time. Submit or die. The 5 Protoss questioned loudly once more with an unusually cold and emotionless tone. You guys think that you can get me to submit with just the few of you? Su Zimo reared his head in laughter in a maniacal manner. The moment he said that, scarlet demonic chi rumbled around his body, forming a series of lifelike ancient demons with menacing gazes and menacing claws. There was a desolate bull that plowed the heavens. There was a mighty and tall stone bear. There was a coiling anaconda. There was a prideful sanguine ape. There was a divine steed that charged forward. There was a ferocious hell tiger. There was a wind leopard that traveled on the wind. Every single demon was incomparably massive. Some were more than 100 feet tall while others were dozens of feet long. They glared with bloodshot eyes with a murderous aura. Su Zimo was surrounded by the 7 ancient demon kings and his aura rose continuously, suppressing the 5 Protoss around him. Su Zimo opened his mouth. Almost at the same time, the 7 ancient demons opened their mouths as well. Roar! Su Zimo and the 7 ancient demons roared at the same time in a deafening manner. Some of the cultivators were so frightened that they fainted on the spot from the roar. Bloodline phenomenon. The Protoss leader's expression changed starkly as he exclaimed. Indeed. Su Zimo's doubts were resolved when he heard the Protoss leader's words. The 7 ancient demons were products of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and possessed terrifying strength. Prior to this, they had helped Su Zimo defend against Shiwuya and other formidable enemies. But now, Su Zimo truly knew that the 7 ancient demons were his bloodline phenomenon. In fact, the 7 big ancient demons had already appeared when he had condensed his inner core. However, he did not realize that those phantoms were related to phenomenons. How is that possible? The Protoss leader looked at everything in disbelief and grit his teeth. The bloodline of humans is lowly and lowly. How can they cultivate phenomenons? Even among the primordial 9 races, not every race possessed a bloodline phenomenon. The Rakshasa race did not have one. Bloodline phenomenons were way too rare. As one's cultivation increased and their bloodline strengthened, the power of their bloodline phenomenons would increase as well and possess limitless possibilities of improvement. What kind of dogsh *T God's nation is this? Break! Su Zimo pointed forward. The 7 big ancient demons around him could not wait any longer and charged out with a ferocious aura. Chapter 774. Under normal circumstances, even a bloodline phenomenon would not be able to fight against a god's nation. However, the appearance of the 7 demons around Su Zimo caused the expressions of all the Protoss to change. They could feel the pressure coming from the 7 great demons. In their minds, they actually had the urge to submit. How could this be? A Protoss's handsome face was filled with disbelief as he murmured, "They're just a bunch of beasts with lowly bloodlines. How could they have such a feeling?" There was no way the Protoss would know that the 7 demons were condensed from Su Zimo's cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. These 7 demons were once infamous demon kings of the vast wilderness. They were the most important helpers by Dai Yu's side and were existences that fought side by side with her. Even though they were only phantoms, they were not afraid of any Protoss. 5 demons charged towards the 5 Protoss. The Hell Tiger Demon King and Wind Leopard Demon King charged towards the leader of the Protoss not far away. Against the encirclement of the Protoss, Su Zimo released his bloodline phenomenon and counterattacked forcefully. The Wild Ox Demon Monarch rampaged forward. His strong body stirred up billowing clouds of dust. He lowered his head and panted heavily. His huge horns heavily slammed into the pyramid. Boom! There was a deafening sound. A series of cracks appeared on the surface of the pyramid and expanded rapidly, spreading throughout the entire pyramid. As for the Wild Bull Demon King, it dimmed significantly as well. The Wild Bull Demon King lowered its head once more and charged forward with a flick. Boom! The pyramid collapsed. On the vast land, the god's nation that many living beings worshipped and prayed to vanished along with it. Against the tremendous impact, the Wild Bull Demon King's figure dissipated as well. Boom! 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 Almost at the same time, the Stone Bear Demon King's massive body leaned heavily against the pyramid. The Anaconda Demon King coiled around the pyramid and hissed into the skies, as though it wanted to devour the blazing sun. Its body that was dozens of feet long shrunk continuously and squeezed against the pyramid. The Crimson Ape's eyes glowed with a crimson light. It swung its fists like stone hammers and continuously bombarded the pyramid. The hooves of Demon King Divine Chariot were like thunder. He transformed into a streak of white light and arrived in an instant. The powerful impact almost penetrated the pyramid. The 5 pyramids continued to shake under the crowd's gaze until they completely collapsed. The crowd was aghast. Su Zimo's bloodline phenomenon was so terrifying that he was not at a disadvantage even when fighting 1 against 5. The remaining 2 monster kings rushed towards the Protoss commander. The Protoss commander's hands, which were originally behind his back, were finally free. The blood essence in his body surged, and his entire body emitted a golden light. He was like an insufferably arrogant god. The Protoss commander didn't back down in the face of the 2 big ancient demons. Instead, he strode forward. He raised his hand and threw a punch. It was a simple action. However, it caused the heaven and earth to tremble. Many cultivators sucked in a cold breath. This was using the power of his bloodline and physical body to forcefully resist the power of the phenomenon. How strong was his self-confidence? Boom! Boom! There were 2 deafening sounds. The remaining 2 great ancient demons were shattered by the 2 punches of the Protoss commander and dissipated completely. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Even if he was in his peak condition, he wouldn't dare to say that he could win against the Protoss commander. Too weak, the Protoss commander reached out and stroked the slightly messy golden hair on his forehead gently. With a cold expression, he said indifferently, "If I allow you to continue cultivating, you might be able to threaten me. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance." The moment he said that, the Protoss commander's figure vanished. A pyramid appeared where he was initially standing. It was a few thousand feet tall and had a majestic aura. It shone with a bedazzling golden light. The pyramid was way too gigantic. The pyramids created by the other Protoss weren't even a tenth of this pyramid. Even Su Zimo's body that was 100 feet tall appeared short in the face of the pyramid. There were many smaller pyramids floating around the gigantic pyramid. At the top of each pyramid stood a Protoss. At the bottom of the pyramids were countless living beings who were praying and chanting day and night. This was the true nation of God. The Protoss commander stood at the top of the pyramid in the middle. Like a god, he looked down at Su Zimo and said coldly, "That's all you're capable of. However, you haven't seen what I'm capable of yet. A lion will use its full strength even when hunting a rabbit. I won't give you any chances." After the god race leader said that, the majestic pyramids beneath him began to move in Su Zimo's direction, suppressing him slowly. A huge shadow shrouded over, emitting a boundless might. Under that shadow, the minds of many cultivators collapsed. Everyone felt despair. It was as if they could only watch helplessly as the heavens collapsed and buried everyone, yet they were powerless to do anything about it. Heis. Monk Yin Lu gripped his wrists and sighed. If that lad had sufficient spirit energy and released that black tortoise golden lotus phenomenon, he might have been able to fight against the nation of God. Unfortunately, perfected Lord Yujun shook his head as well. Perhaps a miracle will happen. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said softly, as though she was asking herself or consoling herself and everyone else. On the battlefield. Su Zimo's expression was cold as he reared his head and glared at the pyramids above him. His eyes were as deep as the ocean without any ripples. However, his aura was rising against the suppression of the nation of God. All of a sudden, behind him, amidst the surging demonic chi, a demonic beast gradually appeared. Its blood-red wings were imprinted with two bright full moons, resembling a pair of eyes. It was a gigantic blood-colored butterfly. Even though it was gigantic, it was only around 10 feet in size. Compared to the pyramids that were a few thousand feet tall, it was as insignificant as an ant. However, the blood-colored butterfly had caused the entire Wanxiang city to fall into silence. Complete silence. An unprecedentedly terrifying aura spread through the air. Everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. Even the battle between Night Spirit and the Rakshasa race paused for a moment. When the Rakshasa leader caught sight of the blood-colored butterfly, he felt his scalp prickle and his hair stand on end. Even his bloodline froze and he nearly fell from midair. Night Spirit did not manage to seize that opportunity. That was because he glanced over as well. He would not feel fear even against the Protoss or Rakshasa race. However, his pupils constricted with a hint of fear the moment he caught sight of the blood-colored butterfly. What is that? Perfected Lord Yujun grit his teeth and his voice trembled slightly. Suddenly, the wings of the blood-colored butterfly flapped gently all of a sudden. The movement was so subtle that it was almost undetectable. However, that single flap of the wings caused a terrifying storm. The voids above Su Zimo's head seemed to be distorting, collapsing and collapsing. Around the celestial race leader, many small pyramids shook and trembled. Sand and stones tumbled down and cracks appeared on the pyramids' bodies. The pyramids beneath the Protoss leader were the only ones that remained standing. Rumble. Boom. Countless small pyramids collapsed and turned into dust. The massive nation of God that blanketed the skies was about to be destroyed by a seemingly insignificant butterfly. Chapter 775. The blood-colored butterfly was none other than Dai Yu's phantom. Back in the Battle of the Great Qian Ruins, the appearance of this blood butterfly phantom was also the reason why Su Zimo managed to kill the #1 perfected being of the North region, Shibuya, and became famous. Initially, Su Zimo did not know why the blood-colored butterfly phantom would appear. Just now, he finally understood that the blood-colored butterfly phantom should be the ultimate phenomenon of his bloodline. Right now, half of the blood butterfly was illusory and not corporeal. He guessed that the blood butterfly would only fully materialize and release its true might after he cultivated to the final step of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings 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 of the 12 demon kings. The Protoss leader looked down from above and glared at the blood butterfly behind Su Zimo with a shocked expression. The appearance of the blood butterfly had already given him the scent of death. The blood butterfly merely flapped its wings gently and many small pyramids in the god's nation collapsed one after another. If the blood butterfly continued to flap its wings, the pyramids he was sitting on would not be able to last much longer either. Let's see if your blood butterfly can defeat my god's nation. The Protoss leader hollered, and with a single thought, he controlled the god's nation to descend and suppress Su Zimo viciously. The blood butterfly behind Su Zimo flapped its wings and flew forward. It was as though an ant was trying to shake a tree or a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, when the two of them collided in midair, an incomparably frightening aura burst forth and swept through the 9 heavens and all directions. Space and time seemed to have frozen. In the next moment, a dazzling halo suddenly burst forth. The power released by the collision of the two bloodline phenomenons was way too terrifying. Against the impact of that power, the Protoss leader could not control his body and fell from midair. Su Zimo could not stand on his feet either, and his massive body was sent flying instantly, crashing onto the ground and stirring up dust. The Protoss leader stood up from the dust with a terrible expression. His originally handsome face and neat clothes were now stained with dust, making him look somewhat disheveled. On the surface, the two of them seemed to be evenly matched. However, the Protoss commander knew that if Su Zimo was in his peak condition, he would have been at a disadvantage in a one-on-one fight. However, that was only an if. Currently, he had 5 clan members by his side. Moreover, Su Zimo was not in his best condition. He had used up a lot of energy in this clash, and he had also suffered quite a bit of impact. But Su Zimo's consumption was even greater. Amidst the flying dust, Su Zimo slowly walked out of the gully. The ferocious, enormous figure had disappeared. Su Zimo returned to his original form. He looked a little frail and weak. His upper body was naked and covered in cuts and bruises. Most of the bruises were from just now when he broke free from the Rakshasa's spiked chains. His face looked a little pale under his messy black hair. As the Protoss leader had expected, his stamina was almost depleted. From the moment he fought with Diin till now, Su Zimo had not rested for a single moment in the continuous battles. If not for the fact that he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and had a frightening physique, he would have collapsed long ago. Patron Su, hurry and leave while you still have energy. Given your capabilities, even the Protoss leader won't be able to stop you. Monkey Lu could clearly tell that Su Zimo was weak and sent a voice transmission. In reality, everyone had already expected the battle to reach this stage. Everyone could tell that Su Zimo had already tried his best. However, the building was about to collapse, and the raging waves were about to fall. How could human strength save it? When he heard Monkey Lu's advice, Su Zimo remained silent and merely shook his head. There was no way he could leave. Xiaoning, Monkey and Little Fatty were here, there were his family, his brothers, and his friends. If he were to escape, none of them would be spared. He would not leave even if he had to die in Myriad Phenomenon City. When he sensed the determination in Su Zimo's gaze, Monkey Lu sighed internally and did not try to persuade him anymore. Fufu. The Protoss leader laughed. Your inner core can't even sustain just now's body. How much longer can you last? It's enough to kill you. Su Zimo smiled gently, but his tone was murderous. Dream on. The Protoss leader retracted his smile and said coldly, let's see what other tricks you have up your sleeves. Kill. The moment he said that, the Protoss leader and the other 5 Protoss split into different directions and attacked at the same time, charging towards Su Zimo. Good timing. Su Zimo was fearless as he whipped out a blood-red saber and shouted, "Let my blood quencher have a taste of the blood of you Protoss." The 5 Protoss were bare-handed, but their speed did not show any signs of slowing down. On the contrary, a look of mockery seemed to flash through the depths of the 5 Protoss's eyes. Su Zimo's heart sank and he felt a little uneasy. All of a sudden, the Protoss leader swiped his storage bag and a grayish-black mountain appeared in his palm. Although it was only the size of a palm, it exuded a mysterious aura. Before Su Zimo could release his saber technique, Blood Quencher flew towards the mountain uncontrollably. Even with Su Zimo's strength, he could not stop Blood Quencher. Not only that, Blood Quencher even pulled him off the ground and into the air, flying towards the grayish-black mountain in the Protoss leader's palm. What's going on? Su Zimo was shocked. Why did Blood Quencher break free from his control and fly towards the grayish-black mountain uncontrollably? At that moment, Su Zimo had already lost his balance. If he allowed Blood Quencher to pull him, he would have been killed by the other 5 Protoss before he even reached the Protoss leader. Without hesitation, Su Zimo retracted his hand immediately. Even so, he could still feel a powerful suction force. It came from his left hand. That glove. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. He was still wearing a Khanate spirit weapon glove on his left hand that he obtained from killing Glass Palace's paragons. Although he did not know the reason, that was the only possibility. The 5 Protoss had already closed in. In a flash, Su Zimo removed his glove and allowed it to fly away. Suddenly, a series of crackling sounds could be heard from his body. In the blink of an eye, his body that was initially 7 feet long shrank into a meatball. Bang! 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 The fists of the 5 Protoss missed. Even so, Su Zimo could still sense a powerful energy fluctuation circling around him and his organs were shaken considerably. That was close. If he had reacted slower, he would have been torn apart by the 5 Protoss and died on the spot. Watch out, young master. Right then, Nian Qi shouted, that mountain is the ancient unique treasure, Mystic Magnet Mountain. It possesses the power of magnetism and any weapon with metal attributes will be sucked over. No wonder, Su Zimo's eyes flickered and he was enlightened. Ah, it's the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Perfected Lord Yujun's expression changed starkly as he exclaimed. The Mystic Magnet Mountain was extremely famous. Some treasures were neither spirit nor dermic weapons. However, they possessed extraordinary and unique abilities. If they were used properly, they could even be stronger than dermic treasures. Those treasures were known as unique treasures. The Mystic Magnet Mountain was one of the 7 great ancient unique treasures. Chapter 776. Oh no! Perfected Lord Luo Shui said deeply with a grim expression, as one of the 7 unique treasures, the Mystic Magnet Mountain is enough to suppress all spirit weapons even if the Protoss leader can't unleash its true strength. More than half of the 7 unique treasures were lost in the ancient war. How did it end up in the hands of the Protoss? Perfected Lord Yujun frowned. Right then, on another battlefield, the Rakshasa leader who was fighting against Night Spirit noticed the commotion over here as well. He scoffed coldly and said in an eccentric manner, "Indeed, the Protoss beat us to it." Luck, the Protoss leader chuckled smugly. With a jolt of his palm, Blood Quencher and the gauntlet fell off gently. Nice saber. The Protoss leader held Blood Quencher and scrutinized it in front of Su Zimo before putting it away in his storage bag. I've got it. Right then, Perfected Lord Yujun said deeply, the reason why the Protoss and Rakshasa race entered the ancient battlefield this time round is most likely because of the Mystic Magnet Mountain. That's right, the Protoss leader did not hide anything when he heard Perfected Lord Yujun's words. We obtained clues about the Mystic Magnet Mountain and entered the ancient battlefield this time round for that unique treasure. However, we heard that the paragons of the human race were gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City and decided to drop by to take a look. Fufu, as expected, a bunch of weaklings that can't even withstand a single blow. Many paragons were furious, but there was nothing they could say. Su Zimo remained silent and merely glared at the mystic magnet mountain in the Protoss leader's palm, thinking of a countermeasure. He was at an even greater disadvantage now that he had brought out that unique treasure. Notwithstanding the fact that his two Khanate spirit weapons were confiscated, he could not use his candlelight sword formation, coiling dragon seal and other weapons either. The only thing he could use was the Great Qian Imperial Seal that he had just snatched from Diin. However, the Great Qian Imperial Seal was a Khanate spirit weapon and might not be able to do anything to the mystic magnet mountain. The situation took a turn for the worse. Whoosh! The Protoss commander didn't give Su Zimo any chance to catch his breath. With a swift movement, he closed in on Su Zimo. His vitality surged, and a golden ocean seemed to surround him. His aura was terrifying. The 5 Protoss around him also attacked at the same time. The coordination between the 6 of them could be said to be perfect and flawless. The 6 Protoss had been accumulating power for a long time and were brimming with energy. Su Zimo, on the other hand, was already exhausted from the continuous battles. Furthermore, his 2 Khanate spirit weapons were taken away and he was empty-handed right now. It was clear who had won and who had lost. Even so, many cultivators were still staring at the battlefield with anticipation in their eyes. Everyone held their breaths, and no one blinked. In this kind of close combat confrontation, life and death could be decided in an instant. When the 6 Protoss were about to close in on him, Su Zimo displayed his extremely strong melee combat strength, accurate judgment and control of the situation in a flash. With a cold expression, Su Zimo retreated like a massive and clumsy rock bear as he leaned towards the Protoss behind him. Bang! The 2 of them clashed head-on and it was as though they were defeated. Although Su Zimo took the Protoss's fist head-on with his back, the Protoss's expression changed starkly as he grunted and retreated continuously. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness. If it was any other race or cultivator, that single collision would have snapped their tendons and bones and ended their lives. The moment the Protoss at the back retreated, the initially narrow space became much wider. Su Zimo retreated with the momentum and avoided the Protoss that were charging towards him from both sides. Turning around suddenly, he sped up once more and charged towards the retreating Protoss with a ferocious gaze. Kill! Su Zimo roared, and it was as deafening as a clap of thunder. The Protoss was shocked, and his body trembled. In this momentary pause, Su Zimo had already arrived in front of him. He reached out his hands and clamped down on the Protoss's shoulders, bent his knees, and charged forward. In the eyes of many cultivators, Su Zimo's figure seemed to have disappeared. In his place was an incomparably handsome horse. This collision emitted an incomparably tragic aura. Crack! The Protoss's chest caved in, forming a huge crater. Broken bones pierced into his lungs and internal organs. Just this one blow was enough to take his life. However, the Protoss's bloodline was strong, and his vitality was also extremely vigorous. Even after suffering such an impact, the Protoss still did not die on the spot. He coughed out large mouthfuls of golden blood and still wanted to counterattack and kill Su Zimo. There was no way Su Zimo would give him the chance. At the same time as he bent his knees, he exerted strength with both hands and gripped the Protoss's shoulders, pulling them to both sides. Shing! The Protoss's arms were torn off by Su Zimo. Fresh blood splattered on the ground, shimmering with a faint golden glow. The body of this god fell far away. His eyes were unfocused, and he gradually stopped breathing. The crowd was in an uproar when they saw that. That was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. Despite being surrounded by 6 Protoss, he was still so domineering and managed to kill one of them. Bastard, you deserve to die. The rest of the god clan members cursed angrily as they approached. The Protoss leader flipped his palm and gripped the ancient phenomenon, the mystic magnet mountain, before smashing it down viciously at Su Zimo's head. He was decisive. I've got to get rid of the mystic magnet mountain first. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Although he had something with him that was mixed with metal attributes, it had a mysterious origin and might be able to shake the mystic magnet mountain. At that thought, Su Zimo no longer hesitated and slapped his storage bag, retrieving a gigantic bronze square tripod. The bronze square tripod was mottled with rust and filled with cracks, as though it could shatter at any moment. However, the tripod gave off an ancient and desolate aura. That aura seemed to be even older than the ancient phenomenon steel. Su Zimo swung the bronze square tripod and smashed it towards the mystic magnet mountain. Clang! The mystic magnet mountain and the bronze square tripod collided. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing echoed, almost piercing one's eardrums. Many cultivators spectating the battle even covered their ears and squatted down with pained expressions. The two people in the middle of the battlefield shuddered even more. Their palms were drenched in blood from the recoil. Their flesh was torn apart, and they couldn't even hold their weapons properly. The mystic magnet mountain and bronze square tripod were sent flying. Su Zimo's figure slammed heavily onto the ground. The Protoss leader flipped a couple of times in midair before falling as well. The other 4 Protoss had just charged forward when they were sent flying by the terrifying shockwave from the collision of the two weapons. Their faces were pale and their minds buzzed, even their ears were temporarily deaf. Su Zimo fell to the ground and felt pain all over his body, almost fainting. However, he still struggled right away. Amidst the dust, his eyes shone coldly as he glared at the Protoss leader not far away with a chilling killing intent. An opportunity. This was his only chance to kill the Protoss leader. If he could kill the Protoss leader before the 4 Protoss surrounded him once more, he might be able to reverse the entire situation. Chapter 777. On the ground, a long, winding figure dashed toward the Protoss commander, stirring up clouds of dust and sand. It was like a nimble python, extremely fast. The Protoss commander had just stabilized himself when he felt a murderous aura coming at him, almost suffocating him. Kill! A loud roar sounded in the Protoss commander's ears. Thunderclap kill! The Protoss commander's god's blood surged. Almost instantly, he dispelled this sonic attack without being affected at all. The next moment, amidst the howling sand, a figure appeared faintly. It seemed to be kneeling, but it wasn't kneeling. The killing intent in its eyes was restrained, and its hands seemed to be holding a divine fruit as it struck toward the commander's chin. Good timing. The Protoss commander exhaled and said loudly, "I'll show you the power of a Protoss." The Protoss commander didn't retreat or dodge. He took half a step forward, bent his arms, and bent his elbows downward. Like a big spear, he stabbed down fiercely towards Su Zimo's hands that were holding up. Bang! The collision between flesh, blood, and bones was dull and powerful. Su Zimo's whole body shook, and he grunted. His closed hands were almost broken by the Protoss commander's attack. With just this one contact, he realized that the God race leader's strength was very strong. Very strong. Even if he was in his peak condition, he might not be able to win in close combat. The Protoss bloodline was indeed terrifying. Now, Su Zimo was already exhausted. His inner core power and vitality power were greatly weakened. He couldn't block the Protoss commander's attack at all. At this moment, after the Protoss commander bent his elbows downward, he took half a step forward again. Half of his arm was like a steel whip, and he swung it fiercely. Whoosh! This half of his arm smashed directly towards Su Zimo's divine spirit. The wind was fierce. These two moves were exquisite, and they were connected smoothly like flowing water. With Su Zimo's current condition, he couldn't block this move at all. Moreover, he had already sensed that the 4 Protoss who were scattered not far away were rushing toward him. If he retreated now, he would completely lose the chance to kill the Protoss commander. Su Zimo's expression was calm. He narrowed his eyes, raised his right hand, and clenched it into a fist to block the attack. He had the phoenix bone in his right hand. No matter how strong the Protoss commander was, he couldn't possibly break the phoenix bone. If he could activate the power of the divine phoenix bone, Su Zimo would be able to kill him. If he couldn't, he could at least make the god race leader suffer a small loss. Bang! The 2 fists. Secretly taking a deep breath, Su Zimo frowned and revealed a pained expression. Even though he had the divine phoenix bone and could ensure that his palm was fine, his arm was still in unbearable pain from the terrifying impact. Su of the Protoss of the Protoss, of the Protoss of the Protoss of the of his of bones of Protoss of his Su. Ah! The Protoss commander wasn't having a good time either. With a cry of pain, he retracted his arm. His fist was covered in bruises. Congealed blood. Of course, this minor injury was nothing to the Protoss commander. His golden god blood circulated and his palm recovered to its original state. Right then, Su Zimo endured the pain and leaped up. Withdrawing the Great Qian Imperial Seal from his storage bag with his left hand, he smashed it down on the god race leader with overwhelming might. He clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it down at the same time as though he was swinging a sledgehammer. Humph! The Protoss commander did not retreat and reached out with both hands at lightning speed. The Protoss commander spread open his fingers and they shone with a golden glow, surging with a terrifying power. It was clear that he had released some sort of secret skill of the Protoss. Piak! Almost at the same time, the Protoss commander gripped the Great Qian Imperial Seal and Su Zimo's fist respectively. Both parties were in a stalemate and were wrestling with each other. You can't win. The Protoss commander's eyes shone with a golden glow. Not necessarily. Su Zimo scoffed coldly as a bedazzling light burst forth from his right eye. It was as though a blazing sun was hanging in the air, illuminating the entire world as though it was daytime. An incomparably blinding beam of light shot towards the Protoss commander's face. Illumination Eye. That was Su Zimo's killing move. All his previous methods were for this burst. The 2 of them were way too close and there was no way to dodge at all. Visual technique. That's an visual technique. What a powerful visual technique. It's probably not weaker than Di Yin's Eclipse Eye. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. In the world of cultivation, secret techniques such as the sound domain secret technique and the eye technique were extremely rare. Even if one had a cultivation technique, they might not be able to cultivate it successfully. Since ancient times, there had been countless people who had gone blind due to mishaps while cultivating eye techniques. Visual techniques could be considered as instant secret skills that were hard to defend against and impossible to guard against. Right now, the Protoss commander was facing the attack of an visual technique. The power of the beam of light before him could definitely destroy him. He could smell the scent of death that he had not smelled in a long time. The Protoss commander held the Great Qian Imperial Seal in his left hand and Su Zimo's fist in his right. At this distance, there was no way he could withdraw his hand to defend against the power of the visual technique. Su Zimo had calculated everything. Nobody could save him. He could only save himself. In a flash, a golden glow burst forth from the depths of the Protoss commander's eyes. His pupils were already dyed golden and were cold and merciless with an endless might. God's Eye. With that shout, the Protoss commander's eyes shone with a golden glow and 2 beams of light burst forth. The 2 beams of light converged in midair, forming an even thicker golden pillar of light that collided fiercely against the blinding white beam of light. God's Eye, the Protoss's visual technique. Only those with the Protoss bloodline could cultivate it. Sizzle. The two beams of light collided in midair and paused for a moment before letting out a horrifying sound. The two powers were corroding each other. Immediately after, the blinding white light shone brightly and directly shattered the golden light in front of it. It instantly sank into the right eye of the Protoss commander and disappeared. Ah! The Protoss commander let out a heart-wrenching scream. The Protoss commander quickly retreated and covered his left eye. At the same time, he waved one hand and bit the tip of his tongue, spitting out a mouthful of essence blood to form a golden light shield in front of him. Su Zimo was about to take advantage of the situation to pursue an attack, but he was blocked by the golden light shield. Then, he was already surrounded by surging golden aura. Fierce attacks came from all directions. The four Protoss had arrived. What a pity. Looking at the Protoss commander not far away, Su Zimo sighed inwardly. In fact, if the Protoss commander hadn't cultivated God's Eye, with the power of the illuminating eye, he would definitely be able to pierce through the Protoss commander's head and kill him on the spot. However, with the power of God's Eye blocking, this sure-kill attack only blinded the Protoss commander's left eye. The Protoss commander's reaction was even faster. He didn't panic because of this. He immediately retreated and at the same time, set up a trap to block Su Zimo's pursuit. If not for this, Su Zimo could have followed closely behind and killed him. Unfortunately, all his efforts were for naught. Although this battle was short, it had already exhausted the last of Su Zimo's stamina and mental strength. Now, the four Protoss had surrounded him. It was almost impossible for him to kill a god-race chieftain again. In other words, Su Zimo wanted to protect himself now, but it was wishful thinking. Chapter 778. Bang! 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 Su Zimo could no longer defend against the five Protoss and tried his best to avoid his vitals. However, his chest, abdomen and back received 3 solid punches. Su Zimo staggered 3 steps back with a pale face. His tendons and bones felt like they were about to crack as his blood chi rumbled and his organs were shaken violently. His breathing was filled with the thick stench of blood. If it was any other cultivator, a single punch from the Protoss would be enough to split their body into pieces, let alone 3 punches. On the other side, Night Spirit's initially calm expression turned anxious when he saw that. If one were to take a closer look, they would be able to tell that there was still a hint of struggle, hesitation and wariness in the depths of his eyes. Night Spirit had yet to revert to his true form. Even so, the number of Rakshasas that died in his hands increased. Even the Rakshasa leader could not stop Night Spirit's massacre. As time passed by, the Rakshasa leader was increasingly alarmed. He could vaguely sense that the black-robed man before him seemed to be suppressing something. There seemed to be an even more terrifying and frightening power hidden within the black-robed man's body. However, he was wary and did not release it the entire time. The Rakshasa leader was already thinking of retreating. However, when Su Zimo was in danger and Night Spirit was distracted, the Rakshasa leader seized the opportunity to slice open a bloody wound on Night Spirit's thigh that was so deep that his bones could be seen. If Night Spirit had dodged any slower, his entire thigh would have been sliced off. Blood splattered everywhere. Night Spirit did not say anything but his expression turned colder. When he saw that Night Spirit was injured, the Rakshasa leader's mind became active again. Su Zimo's situation is set. If I can get rid of Su Zimo, I might be able to kill this black-robed man of unknown origins with the help of the Protoss. At that thought, the Rakshasa leader declared, "Everyone, hold on for a little longer. Once our friends from the Protoss arrive, that beast will definitely die." There were less than 20 Rakshasas left. Under the leadership of the Rakshasa leader, a ferocious wave of attacks erupted. However, even if Night Spirit was injured, it could be healed one by one. On the other side, Su Zimo was pushed back by the 4 Protoss. Just as he regained his footing, before he could catch his breath, a golden figure pierced through the air, bringing with it a suffocating pressure, and arrived with a loud bang. A tragic aura assaulted his senses. Although there were only afterimages in front of him, Su Zimo could guess that this was the Protoss commander's attack. He attacked with anger. This punch carried with it the boundless rage and hatred of the god race patriarch. Su Zimo didn't have much strength left. He barely managed to lift his heavy right arm to block in front of his body. Boom! This punch landed heavily on Su Zimo's right arm. The huge force directly sent Su Zimo flying. Crack! His right arm was snapped and twisted, it was completely deformed. Even with Su Zimo's indestructible body, it was still broken by the terrifying power released by the Protoss commander. Thud! This seemingly invincible body was like a falling meteor, heavily crashing into the ground, stirring up clouds of dust. His body was riddled with injuries and he laid motionlessly on the ground. No one knew if he was dead or alive. His body was stained with blood and mud, it was a terrifying sight. The eyes of many cultivators dimmed. They knew very well. Su Zimo's defeat also meant that none of them would be able to leave Myriad Phenomenon City alive. The Protoss commander had a grim expression and his initially handsome face was now incomparably menacing. His left eye was replaced by a bloody hole instead of an eyeball. The area around the wound was charred by a scorching power. Ta! 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 The Protoss commander walked over step by step with endless killing intent surging in his single eye. It was not only targeted at Su Zimo, but every single cultivator present. Since he destroyed one of my eyes, I'll have all of you die with him. The Protoss commander's voice was bone-chilling and spread to every single corner of Myriad Phenomenon City. The Protoss were all incomparably handsome and cared about appearances the most. Now that his right eye was destroyed, it was worse than disfigurement and he would definitely lose favor. His status among the Protoss would drop rapidly as well. Nobody would value him anymore. Someone had to pay for everything. Many cultivators were disheartened. Young master. Little Fox's eyes were already red and swollen from crying as she dashed out of the crowd towards Su Zimo. Monkey and the others could not hold it in and rushed over as well. Don't come over. Right then, Su Zimo's voice sounded. Although he was weak, his tone was firm and unquestionable. Everyone stopped in their tracks. Right after, under countless gazes, the figure lying in the mud supported his battered body with a single arm and stood up slowly. Su Zimo strode over slowly. His severed right arm hung by his side. There was a layer of flesh connecting the two severed arms. As Su Zimo walked, it swayed gently as though it could break at any moment. A moment later, Su Zimo stood in front of many cultivators once more, blocking the path of the Protoss commander. His back view looked frail and wretched. In fact, it seemed as though he could fall at any moment. However, at that moment, all the cultivators were filled with respect. Some of the cultivators felt their noses prickle and could not help but cry. Heis! Monkey Lu sighed deeply and said softly, Patron Su, you've already tried your best. Perfected Lord Yujun said with a sorrowful expression, this isn't the fault of fighting. This is the heavenly tribulation and fate. With his back facing everyone, Su Zimo remained silent. I don't believe in fate. A moment later, Su Zimo spoke slowly, even if this is fate, I'm going to change it. Fu. The Protoss commander on the other side suddenly laughed. The bloody hole on his face looked even more menacing. Illumination Dragon Eye. The Protoss commander grit his teeth and said, to think that you would have cultivated the Illumination Dragon Eye. Su Zimo was slightly stunned. The visual technique that he cultivated was extremely powerful and was imparted to him by the red-headed ghost at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The red-headed ghost did not say what it was called and merely gave it the name, Illumination Eye, based on the illumination stone in his right eye. Could the true name of this visual technique be Illumination Dragon Eye? If it's called Illumination Dragon Eye, why did the red-headed ghost hide it? How did the Protoss recognize the origin of this visual technique? Illumination Dragon Eye, Illumination Dragon. Su Zimo frowned slightly and questions surged in his mind. His mind was in a mess and he could not sort them out right away. He could not be blamed for that. The consecutive battles had truly taken a toll on his body and mind. If this was any other time, he would have figured out what was going on. Stop pretending, the Protoss commander sneered. In Tianhuang mainland, the Heavenly Eye race is the one with the most ferocious and terrifying visual techniques. Apart from the Heavenly Eye race, only the Illumination Dragon Eye can break through my God's eye. The Heavenly Eye race was one of the primordial 9 races. The Protoss commander did not conceal the killing intent in his eyes and said coldly, I don't care what relationship you have with dragons or how you managed to cultivate this secret skill of dragons. No matter who it is, no one will be able to save you today. Dragons? Su Zimo had a confused expression. The only relationship he had with dragons was the fact that he swallowed half a dragon egg in the Dragon Bone Valley. What did that visual technique have to do with dragons? Dragons, dragons, Su Zimo frowned and murmured softly. His head was dizzy and a terrifying power was slowly awakening in the depths of his bloodline. Chapter 779. The Protoss leader's single eye was filled with endless hatred as he exuded a torrential killing intent. Although he had contributed greatly by finding one of the 7 unique treasures, the Mystic Magnet Mountain, in this ancient battlefield expedition, the losses were way too great. Blinding an eye was a loss that could not be reversed or made up for. He could tell that Su Zimo had many secrets. If he could control those secrets in his hands, he might be able to minimize today's losses. Are you still going to persist? The Protoss leader walked towards Su Zimo slowly with a domineering aura as he said coldly, given your current state, you can't even defend against a single finger of mine. Only blood could extinguish the wrath of the Protoss leader. The distance between them was closing. The destructive power could overwhelm them at any moment. It was not only Su Zimo, none of the cultivators present would be spared. Su Zimo looked at the Protoss leader with a cold gaze. However, there was a restless power within his body that seemed like it could explode at any moment. The distance between them was closing. When Night Spirit noticed the situation over here, the killing intent in his eyes intensified as he growled deeply and let out an extremely terrifying roar from the depths of his throat. Immediately after, Night Spirit's skull changed shape. With crisp crackling sounds, an incomparably menacing beast head appeared in the blink of an eye. It resembled a wolf or dog with sharp fangs and purplish gold scales on its surface. Night Spirit had yet to transform into his true form completely and was merely in the form of a demon with his head. Even so, he exuded a shuddering aura. When the Rakshasa leader caught sight of Night Spirit's appearance, he felt his scalp prickle and his hair stand on end, feeling uneasy. Thereafter, as though he thought of something, his pupils constricted as he spoke instinctively, "You are." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Night Spirit's roar. Immediately after, Night Spirit's speed increased explosively as he lunged towards the Rakshasa leader. The Rakshasa leader had a shocked expression and fled into the distance without even looking back. Swash! A black shadow tore through the air at an extremely fast speed and arrived in the blink of an eye. That speed had already surpassed the speed of the Rakshasa leader, arriving first even though he had set off later. Puff! Blood flashed. One of the Rakshasa leader's wings was pierced by the black shadow. The black shadow was the Night Spirit's tail. Its tail was extremely sharp and glittered coldly. It swayed in midair like a snake. The next moment, Night Spirit's hands had already grabbed the Rakshasa leader's shoulders. Night Spirit lunged forward and opened its mouth, biting down on the neck of the Rakshasa leader. Poochie! That bite almost snapped the Rakshasa leader's neck. You The Rakshasa leader's windpipe shattered as his body trembled. He looked terrified as if he wanted to say something, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not complete his sentence. Night Spirit did not give him the chance at all as he bit down on the Rakshasa leader's neck and swung it violently. Crack! A huge head was bitten off by the Night Spirit. The Rakshasa leader was dead. From the moment Night Spirit attacked to killing the Rakshasa leader, the entire process took less than a single breath. Although that scene was shocking, not many people noticed it. That was because almost everyone's attention was attracted by a voice. Ancient Dragonification Manual. Su Zimo's voice sounded. That's the secret skill of the human emperor. Perfected Lord Yujun exclaimed. Nobody expected that Su Zimo would not give up even under such circumstances. Su Zimo's spirit energy was already depleted and there was no way he could release the ancient Dragonification Manual. However, earlier on, a thought flashed through his mind out of nowhere. He wanted to use the power of his inner core to activate the ancient Dragonification Manual. Su Zimo gathered the remaining demonic power in his body and rumbled with demonic chi. The power of his inner core channeled the ancient Dragonification Manual and awakened a terrifying power that was dormant in the depths of his body. His blood chi had long deteriorated after the consecutive battles. However, at that moment, his bloodline shone with a massive life force once more. Like a hurricane or a tsunami, it swept through every single corner of his body, coursed through his limbs and organs. Pain. Intense pain. Pain that was everywhere. Su Zimo felt as though his body was about to explode. Roar. Su Zimo raised his head and roared into the skies. It was loud and resonant, piercing through metal and rocks with an ancient and dignified aura. It was as though it was a roar from the primordial era that could bring down stars. Instantly, the world shook and the weather changed. The roar that came from Su Zimo's mouth did not belong to a human. Dragon roar. Perfected Lord Yujun's eyes widened and his voice trembled. The crowd was shocked. The next moment, something even more shocking happened right in front of countless gazes. The broken bones of his right arm healed automatically. The terrifying bloodline cleansed his wounds repeatedly. His severed arm was regenerating. Although it could not recover to its original state within a short period of time, the sight was shocking enough. Su Zimo's tendons and bones rang at the same time as his body transformed rapidly. His bones mutated and his flesh expanded. His muscles were like tree roots that intertwined like molten steel. What was even more frightening was that green scales appeared on Su Zimo's arms, thighs, chest and back. They shone with a cold glint and extended continuously, covering his entire body rapidly. His severed right arm was still regenerating and there were not many changes to it. However, his left arm was abnormally thick and filled with green veins that were strong. The surface of his arm was covered with green scales and had a menacing malevolent aura. Green light shone on Su Zimo's palm and the scales that covered it became denser without any gaps. The scales were like blades and his dark green knuckles protruded with an explosive power. This was no longer a palm, it was a claw. The tip of the claw shone coldly and was sharp as any divine weapon, it was shuddering. Clang! Instinctively, Su Zimo moved his fingers and the tip of the claw made contact gently. Sparks flew and the ear-piercing sound of metal clashing could be heard. Su Zimo was stunned when he looked at this unfamiliar and menacing palm of his. The ancient Dragonification Manual was completely out of his control. He had truly transformed into a dragon. Although he was not in the form of dragons, it was difficult to tell that he was human from his body. Even perfected being Yujun was dumbfounded, let alone the cultivators present. As the successor of Enigma Palace, he had naturally heard of the ancient Dragonification Manual. However, this was the outcome of releasing the ancient Dragonification Manual? How could it transform a cultivator into such a state? Su Zimo was puzzled as well. Even if it was his inner core, there was no way such a change could occur when he channeled the ancient dragonification manual. There had to be a reason for this. Su Zimo did not have time to think. Right now, he had something more important to do. He had to get rid of the Protoss before him. Although Su Zimo was still unable to use his right arm after his dragonification, he could sense that his body seemed to have turned even more frightening and possessed endless power. The expression of the Protoss leader turned extremely terrible. Chapter 780. At this stage of the battle, it was completely out of the control of the Protoss leader. Dragons were also one of the primordial 9 races. He could clearly sense the terrifying bloodline aura emanating from Su Zimo. It was extremely pure and filled with supreme might. It was definitely the bloodline of dragons. Furthermore, what came out of Su Zimo's mouth earlier on was a dragon's roar. The Protoss leader felt unprecedented pressure. Kill! The 4 Protoss hollered as their blood chi surged and their divine powers surged as golden spears condensed in their palms. Mysterious and ancient runes were engraved on the spears. Judgment Spear. The 4 Protoss attacked at the same time and threw the golden spears in their hands. Judgment Spear was a secret skill of the Protoss to begin with. Now that it was thrown out with the immense strength of the Protoss, it arrived almost instantly. Su Zimo had just transformed into a dragon and had many doubts in his heart. His reaction was slightly slower and the 4 golden spears had already descended and pierced his body. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal clashing filled the air. Sparks flew. In front of everyone, Su Zimo was pushed back by the power of the judgment spears. However, the truly terrifying thing was that the 4 judgment spears did not pierce Su Zimo's defense, they were all blocked by the scales on his body. Prior to this, countless cultivators had died under the Protoss judgment spears. The spirit arts, secret skills, talismans, and spirit weapons of many cultivators were like paper against the judgment spears and could not withstand a single blow. To think that the judgment spears could not hurt Su Zimo at all. Dragon scales. The Protoss leader's gaze focused. Only true dragon scales have such terrifying defensive capabilities. Swash! Su Zimo's figure vanished from the spot. He was too fast. After transforming into a dragon, Su Zimo's movement technique speed had even surpassed the Rakshasa leaders. One of the Protoss was shocked and felt his scalp go numb. He immediately condensed a huge golden shield in front of him. Just as the light shield was formed, a figure slammed into it. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out. The golden light shield was instantly shattered by this figure. The figure only paused for a moment, then took advantage of the momentum to crash into the body of the God clan member, sending his body flying. He landed right at the feet of the cultivators. Many cultivators turned to look at the divine clan member. The Protoss, who was originally arrogant and domineering, who regarded everyone as ants, was now lying weakly on the ground like a dead dog. Everyone could see that the Protoss's meridians were all shattered, and his bones and tendons were all broken. There was no way he could survive. With just one hit, the Protoss was smashed to death. Savage, violent, and ferocious. Boom! There was another loud bang. Another Protoss was sent flying by Su Zimo. By the time he fell from mid-air, he was already a corpse. The 3rd Protoss was just about to speak when he felt a murderous aura in his face, causing him to swallow his words. The wind was so strong that he could barely open his eyes. The Protoss immediately activated his God's Eye, and a golden light surged in his eyes. His eyesight improved greatly. He saw Su Zimo's tall and ferocious figure right in front of him. Swoosh! Su Zimo reached out with his green claws and grabbed at the top of the person's head. The Protoss raised his arms and tried to block Su Zimo's arm. However, Su Zimo was too strong. The Protoss's arms couldn't withstand it at all. Splat! The green dragon claw descended and directly tore through the Protoss's head. The last Protoss was shocked and almost scared out of his wits. He turned around and fled. However, the moment he turned around, he heard a dragon's roar. It shocked his mind. The Protoss trembled. Splat! He felt pain in his chest and his entire body twitched uncontrollably. He tried to look down. There was a bloody claw on his chest. In the palm of his hand, he was holding a burning heart. That was his heart. The Protoss's head fell to the side and he died. The whole process happened too quickly. In almost the blink of an eye, the 4 Protoss around Su Zimo all fell to the ground and became 4 corpses. Even if the Protoss leader wanted to help, he couldn't stop it. After Su Zimo killed the 4 Protoss, he didn't rush towards the Protoss leader. Instead, his figure flickered and turned into a green light, instantly arriving beside Nian Qi. There was always a Protoss guarding beside Nian Qi. Suddenly, the Protoss felt uneasy. The corners of his eyes twitched, and before he could react, a green light flashed in front of him. Get lost! Immediately after, a cold voice sounded in his ears. God's kingdom. The Protoss didn't have time to think. He roared, his bloodline surged, and immediately activated his bloodline phenomenon. His figure directly disappeared from where he stood. What replaced it was an ancient and mysterious pyramid. Billions of beings knelt around the pyramid, chanting day and night with pious expressions. Su Zimo's eyes were cold, and there was a majestic look between his brows. He stretched out his left hand, clenched his dragon claw into a fist, and smashed it on the pyramid. Rumble. The pyramid had just been formed when it was shattered by Su Zimo's punch. Even the bloodline phenomenon couldn't block Su Zimo's punch. There were no techniques or spells. It was just absolute power. 1 against 10. There was nothing that could stop the slaughter of the dragon race. Exclamation point. The pyramid shattered, and the Protoss's blood was implicated. His expression changed drastically, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Before his figure fell, Su Zimo's second punch descended. Another Protoss had fallen. Su Zimo stretched out his sharp fingertips and gently cut the rope on Nian Qi's body. The rope directly broke. Nian Qi was finally free. Thank you, young master. Nian Qi cried tears of joy. Su Zimo nodded, turned around, and walked toward the Protoss leader step by step. His entire body emitted a monstrous ferocious aura, and his gaze was cold. For the Protoss leader to be able to cultivate to this level and become the leader of Protoss of the same generation, he was naturally not a coward. Moreover, he had no way out. He was the only one left among the 7 Protoss who entered the ancient battlefield. Even if he wanted to leave, it was impossible. He could only fight to the death. Good, good, good. The Protoss leader's expression was gloomy, and his single eye surged with ruthlessness. Without any fear, he said coldly, "Today, I want to see if you succeed in killing a god, or if I can slay a dragon and become famous. With the blood of my Protoss, form the sword of judgment." The Protoss leader chanted loudly and cut his wrist. Golden blood scattered in the air and didn't dissipate. More and more golden blood gathered. The Protoss leader's face became paler and paler. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the golden blood in the air gradually condensed into a giant golden sword, emitting a terrifying aura that seemed to be able to cut through everything. This was a giant sword derived from the Protoss's blood essence. Every part of the sword was condensed with the most terrifying and pure power of the Protoss's blood. It could be said that although this sword was condensed from blood, it was even more terrifying than an inborn spirit weapon. The Protoss leader believed that even Su Zimo's dragon scales couldn't withstand the sharpness of the sword of judgment. Glancing at the latter, he chased after the fleeing Rakshasas in a flash. Su Zimo could vaguely guess that Night Spirit's actions were probably because he was worried about exposing his secret. Unfortunately, I was still lacking a little. The Protoss commander glared at Su Zimo and said slowly, "If I could kill you, the situation would be different." "However, that's nothing," the Protoss commander laughed bitterly. "I've said that the era of the human race is over. Today's battle proves that even more." "Oh." In today's battle, the Protoss and Rakshasas were completely annihilated. Su Zimo sneered. "So what? You humans have been living too comfortably and have long lost the fighting spirit of the past." The Protoss commander pointed at the many cultivators before him and shook his head in laughter. "Look at you so-called paragons of the human race. You don't even have the courage to fight back against the Protoss. What are you going to use to rule Tianhuang mainland? Su Zimo, although you've won today, you're only one person. You can't save the entire human race alone. Furthermore, look at you right now. All the cultivators will only think of you as a fiend demon or an alien race. There's no need for the Protoss to take revenge for me. The human cultivation world will not tolerate you." Su Zimo was silent. There were some things that the Protoss commander was right about. Even if he managed to kill the god race beings in Myriad Phenomenon City today and save the cultivators behind him, the cultivation world outside might not be able to tolerate him. "You humans love infighting the most, ha 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 ha." The Protoss commander laughed maniacally and blood was already dripping from the corner of his lips. The Protoss had a frightening bloodline and an extremely strong vitality. At that moment, his organs were already shattered and his chest was pierced by Su Zimo's dragon claw. However, he was not dead yet and was still alive. "You're wrong. I'm not alone," Su Zimo looked at the Protoss commander calmly. "There are countless human cultivators. How many people like me have you seen?" Back then, Blood Crow Palace joined forces with the four major sects of the Great Zhou dynasty and gathered many itinerant cultivators and experts to invade Misty Peak en masse. The situation was dire. Even the Great Zhou dynasty did not dare to face them head-on. However, someone did. Shura Yenbeichen. He descended upon Misty Peak and severely injured the palace lord of Blood Crow Palace with his Shura saber. "I don't care what race or background you are from. If you provoke me, I'll kill you." Su Zimo believed that if Yenbeichen was here, he would have attacked without retreating as well. Back then, he caused a huge disaster by devouring the dragon egg in the Dragon Bone Valley and lured out a true dragon that chased him all the way to the capital of Great Zhou and nearly caused a calamity. How domineering was it for a mysterious old man to strike back a true dragon single-handedly? Notwithstanding those people, apart from him, Lin Xuanji, Little Fatty, Demonis Ji, Ji Qingtian and the others in Myriad Phenomenon City stood out to fight to the death and protect the final dignity of the human race. There's still a long way to go. Su Zimo looked at Little Fatty and the others and said indifferently, "Right now, they might not be a match for the primordial 9 races. However, one day, they'll be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the primordial 9 races." The human race was born weak but their potential was endless. In fact, they even gave birth to an existence like the ancient human emperor and were feared throughout history. Even the primordial 9 races could only avoid them and live in peace. The glint in the eyes of the leader of the Protoss dimmed gradually. Before long, the body of the leader of the Protoss collapsed with a thud and he stopped breathing. Everything was over and the dust had settled. The hearts of many cultivators finally settled down. Everyone felt as though they had just survived a calamity. There was no joy. Looking at Su Zimo who was bathed in blood and the city filled with corpses, every single cultivator felt conflicted. Prior to this, many of them wanted to kill Su Zimo and gang up on Little Fatty, Xiaoning and the others in a bid to get rid of him. But now, their lives were saved by Su Zimo. At the thought of that, many cultivators looked ashamed and even guilty. Chapter 782. At this point of the battle, the power of Su Zimo's inner core was already depleted. The dragon scales on his body faded gradually and he returned to his original appearance in front of countless gazes. His black hair fluttered and his eyes were clear, he looked like a refined scholar. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have imagined that the Tenjiang tall, gargantuan body that resembled a great ancient demon, the existence that was covered in dragon scales, the imposing gaze, and the ferocious claws and fangs were actually this delicate scholar before them. Who would have thought that this frightening calamity was almost resolved by this seemingly frail scholar? He had turned the tides and saved the day. That was the number one of the phenomenon ranking. This battle had a huge impact on the surviving cultivators. It was not only in terms of cultivation and mental state. Many cultivators' understanding of Tianhuang mainland, the cultivation world and the 10,000 races had changed as well. Many cultivators finally realized the gap between them and the primordial 9 races. Although they were of the same cultivation realm, they could not even resist against the Protoss and Rakshasa race. Su Zimo's body swayed and a sense of weakness spread through his body. His mouth was dry and his head was spinning as a deep fatigue appeared on his face. Young master! Almost at the same time, 2 figures ran out and shouted. It was Nian Qi and Little Fox. Su Zimo smiled and said softly, I'm fine. Young master, it's all my fault. Nian Qi pursed his lips with a guilty expression. If not for me, if not for you, this battle would have been unavoidable. Su Zimo interrupted Nian Qi. Lin Xuanji, Little Fatty, and the others crowded over as well. Brother Su, thank you so much this time round. It was rare for Lin Xuanji to retract his usual nonchalant attitude and bow deeply to Su Zimo with a solemn expression. There's no need for that between us, Su Zimo thumped Lin Xuanji's chest and chuckled. Back in the Dragon Bone Valley, if not for Lin Xuanji, Su Zimo would have died long ago. Su Zimo suspected that the mysterious old man who attacked in the capital of Great Zhou was related to Lin Xuanji as well, he might be an expert of Enigma Palace. Xiaoning's eyes were red and swollen. It was obvious that she had just cried. She passed over a few elixirs and watched as Su Zimo swallowed them. Only then did her expression soften. Little Fatty rolled his eyes and said, Boss, I'll go collect those treasures and bring them over for you. After this shocking battle, rivers of blood flowed in Wanxiang City and corpses were strewn all over the ground. However, in the river of blood, under the corpses, there were countless treasures. Among them, the most important was one of the 7 great unique treasures, the profound Magnet Mountain. Right now, most of those treasures were ownerless and Little Fatty was worried that others would take advantage of them. That was the reason why he took the initiative to help Su Zimo collect them. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, bring me the storage bags of the Protoss and Rakshasa race and the profound Magnet Mountain. There's no need to collect the storage bags of the other cultivators. Let the surviving cultivators of your respective sects take them back. Su Zimo had no qualms about taking the storage bags of the Protoss and Rakshasa race. However, Su Zimo did not want to touch the belongings of the 50,000-odd cultivators who died here. Perfected Lord Yujun nodded silently when he saw that. No matter what, his temperament alone had already surpassed many people. Little Fatty helped to collect the bronze square tripod and other treasures and returned them to Su Zimo. Fu. Suddenly, a soft chuckle sounded from not far away. A cultivator rode on wind and thunder at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before them and stood in midair, looking down at everyone below. Tian Ming. Perfected Lord Luo Shui frowned. The person who had arrived was Perfected Lord Tian Ming of Zephyr Thunder Palace, who had returned after escaping Myriad Phenomenon City. Surveying his surroundings, Perfected Lord Tian Ming's gaze lingered on Su Zimo for a moment before sweeping past the storage bag on the latter's waist with a look of greed in his eyes. Su Zimo lowered his head slightly without saying anything. The hearts of perfected Lord Yujun and the other two sank when they saw perfected Lord Tianming's return. At that moment, Su Zimo was already exhausted. Although he had just consumed the elixir, there was no way he could absorb the medicinal properties within a short period of time. The three of them had yet to recover from their injuries, and any slight movements would cause their wounds to rupture. There was no way they could fight at all. The other cultivators were all perfected Jin Dan, and almost all of them were injured. If perfected Lord Tianming harbored ill intentions, there was no one who could stop him. Perfected Lord Yujun was expressionless as he asked indifferently, "Tianming, since you've already escaped, why did you return?" When the Rakshasa race attacked, the Rakshasa leader was in pursuit of perfected Lord Tianming. The three of them were the ones who managed to save perfected Lord Tianming's life in time. To think that perfected Lord Tianming would turn and flee after putting the three of them in danger. The three of them were truly disgusted by this person. If not for the fact that they were severely injured and the situation was pressing, given perfected Lord Luo Shue's temper, she might have already attacked. "What are you saying, fellow Taoist Yujun?" Perfected Lord Tianming smiled gently. "Initially, I left Myriad Phenomenon City with the intention of sacrificing myself to lure the Rakshasa leader away. Who would have thought that he did not chase after me? After I realized it, I rushed back, wanting to fight to the death with the Rakshasa race. Sigh, seems like I was still a step too late." His words were filled with loopholes. Even a child would not believe it, let alone the three Jinyingzhenjuan. Even many cultivators of Zephyr Thunder Palace felt their faces burn. Shameless scoundrel. Perfected Lord Luo Shui could not help but curse. Humph. Perfected Lord Tianming said coldly, "Luo Shui, you had better watch your words. Given your current state, it's extremely easy for me to kill you. It's best that you don't provoke me." Perfected Lord Luo Shui bolted upright, disregarding the ruptured wounds on her body. She exclaimed with a heroic aura, "Tianming, you're as timid as a mouse. You're like a stray dog in front of the Rakshasa race. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me?" Perfected Lord Tianming's expression darkened and his gaze flickered. He paused for a long time on perfected Lord Luo Shui before retracting his gaze slowly and suppressing the killing intent in his heart. He had more important matters to attend to right now and should not get entangled with others. Perfected Lord Tianming said indifferently, "I'll spare your life for now on account that you're a woman from Snowdrift Valley. I've returned for other matters." With that said, perfected Lord Tianming's gaze shifted and landed on Su Zimo. "Junior, hand me your storage bag and I'll spare your life." Perfected Lord Tianming was expressionless and his voice was cold. Suddenly, the crowd went silent. Many cultivators were indignant but none of them dared to make a sound. "Tianming, what's the meaning of this?" Perfected Lord Yujun suppressed the rage in his heart and said in a deep voice, "This calamity was resolved entirely because of Su Zimo. Yet, you're trying to kick him while he's down." "You're exaggerating," Perfected Lord Tianming replied. "That lad possesses the secret skill of Zephyr Thunder Palace, the Purple Thunder Manual. How am I kicking him while he's down when I'm retrieving the secret skill of our sect?" "Since you're retrieving the Purple Thunder Manual, why do you want his storage bag?" Monkey Lu questioned. Perfected Lord Tianming chuckled. "Who knows what's in his storage bag? Who knows, there might be other treasures of Zephyr Thunder Palace apart from the Purple Thunder Manual. I'll take the opportunity to check it out and retrieve it as well." This was akin to daylight robbery. "You're clearly taking advantage of the situation and yet, you're making it sound so righteous. How shameless." Little Fatty could not hold it in any longer and cursed out loud. Lin Xuanji and the others were enraged as well. Chapter 783. Perfected Lord Tianming's heart burned with passion. This was a rare opportunity. Right now, the cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City were either exhausted or severely injured, there was no one who could stop him. Initially, he was wary of the black-robed man known as Night Spirit. However, Night Spirit had already left Myriad Phenomenon City in order to hunt down the remaining Rakshasas. Although there were not many Rakshasas left, they fled in all directions. It was impossible for Night Spirit to kill all of them within a short period of time. As long as he could snatch Su Zimo's storage bag as soon as possible and flee far away to hide carefully, no one would be able to find him in this vast ancient battlefield. Although this was somewhat dishonorable, he would be able to explain himself when he returned to Tianhuang mainland. After all, outsiders could not say anything if he wanted to retrieve a secret skill that belonged to Zephyr Thunder Palace. Tianming, don't forget that there are more than 50,000 paragons here. Perfected Lord Yujun said in a deep voice, if you want to snatch Su Zimo's storage bag, you'll have to ask for the permission of the 50,000 paragons. Even if we're severely injured, you can't defend against 50,000 cultivators single-handedly. That's right. Pang Yu of Overlord Palace stood out. Although his face was pale, he patted his chest and declared loudly, it's all thanks to fellow Daoist Su that we managed to survive today. If you want to attack him, I'll be the first to object. If you want to touch him, you'll have to ask the sword in my hand first. Dugu Jian said coldly. One after another, cultivators stood out from the crowd. Some were familiar and some were unfamiliar. Some were former opponents and some were friends. Of course, most of the cultivators were silent. Some of them wanted to speak but hesitated. Some of them had flickering gazes, some had hesitant expressions and some watched coldly from the sidelines. At that moment, everyone's emotions were revealed without a doubt. When he noticed that, Perfected Lord Tianming's lips curled and he was even calmer as he declared loudly, everyone, don't be silly. Su Zimo is of a foreign race and he's only intervening to save his friends. He doesn't care about your lives at all. Hee. Quite a few of you have besieged his friends before, Li Chia chuckled. Who knows, he might even come after you guys after he recovers from his injuries. There was a commotion in the crowd. Perfected Lord Tianming's words struck a chord with some cultivators. When he saw that, the smile in Perfected Lord Tianming's eyes intensified. If you protect him today, who knows, he might start a massacre tomorrow. Perfected Lord Tianming's bewitching voice continued, don't forget that he's from an alien race. Who can guarantee that he won't treat you like the Rakshasa or the Protoss? Don't forget the ancient saying, those who are not of our race are bound to have different intentions. What true monarch said, is not without reason. Yeah, he fought against the Protoss and the Rakshasa not to save us. We don't have to protect him. That person even took on the form of dragons just now. The dragons are also one of the primordial 9 races. They're probably no better than the Protoss and Rakshasa. Discussions broke out in the crowd. However, his voice was very soft and lacked confidence. When she saw that, Demoness Ji laughed mockingly. I've finally witnessed what it means to repay kindness with ingratitude today. The evil of human nature is nothing more than this. That's how human nature is, Lin Xuanji sighed. Mortals think that cultivators are all sage-like and otherworldly. However, they don't know that the desires of cultivators are the strongest. The cultivation world isn't some paradise either. It's much crueler than the mortal world. Scheming and murdering for treasures are everywhere. For the sake of longevity and strength, some cultivators are willing to resort to unscrupulous means. What's wrong with repaying kindness with ingratitude? Listen to me. Suddenly, Perfected Lord Yujun hollered and the wound on his severed arm tore open instantly, causing blood to gush out. However, he was oblivious to it. It doesn't matter if Su Zimo is a demon or dragons. Anyone in this world can attack him except you guys. Perfected Lord Yujun pointed to the endless crowd of 50,000 cultivators and said word by word with a stern expression, that's because all of you owe him your lives. The clamor from earlier on quietened down gradually. Monkey Lu placed his palms together and chanted a Buddhist proclamation softly, saying indifferently, I don't know about the major issues of whether he's an alien race or not. However, I know one thing. He almost sacrificed his life to save all of us. Without him, we would all be dead by now, reduced to dead souls in the hands of the Protoss and flesh in the stomachs of the Rakshasa race. I don't know what's right or wrong, but I know what it means to draw a clear line between gratitude and grudges. These words were powerful and resonant, deafening even the apathetic. Some people lowered their heads and some looked ashamed. Perfected Lord Tianming's expression was dark. Sensing that something was amiss with the situation, he could no longer hold it in and barked coldly, Monkey Lu, don't try to mislead the masses with your lies. At that moment, Perfected Lord Tianming was prepared to strike. He could not drag this on any longer. The longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. If he waited for Night Spirit to return, it would be impossible for him to escape even if he wanted to. Right now, the remaining 50,000-odd cultivators were not united and each of them had their own agendas. As long as not many of them stood on Su Zimo's side, he would succeed. Disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace, heed my orders. Kill anyone who dares to stop me. Perfected Lord Tianming was murderous and his glabella shone brightly. A series of lightning bolts appeared in his palm with a frightening aura. Protect the young master. Protect Brother Su. Nian Qi, Lin Xuanji, and the others surrounded Su Zimo and protected him in the middle, forming a human wall. Fufu, why go through so much trouble? Suddenly, Su Zimo chuckled softly. You want my storage bag? I'll give it to you. Su Zimo patted little Fatty on the shoulder and gestured for him to move aside. Boss? Little Fatty exclaimed softly with a questioning look in his eyes. It's fine, move aside. Su Zimo nodded with a smile with a calm expression. Everyone exchanged glances. Although they were hesitant, they still made way for him. Su Zimo walked out slowly and removed the storage bag from his waist. Looking at Perfected Lord Tianming who was not far away, he handed it over and said indifferently, the storage bag is here. Come and get it if you want it. Perfected Lord Tianming's pupils constricted slightly. He had already scanned Su Zimo's body with his spirit consciousness multiple times and could confirm that the lad's blood qi was weak and his spirit energy was depleted. He was definitely unable to fight anymore. However, what was this lad trying to do with his attitude? Although Su Zimo looked exhausted, there was no hint of panic on his face and he looked calm. Hee. Perfected Lord Tianming's thoughts changed as he sneered, Junior, you're cunning. I'm sure you're trying to lure me in before executing your killing move, right? You're still too inexperienced. How can you hide your intentions from me? In reality, given Su Zimo's current state, he would not be in any danger even if he closed in. However, there was nothing wrong with being more careful. You don't even dare to take my storage bag when I'm giving it to you. Su Zimo retracted his smile and hung the storage bag on his waist once more, saying coldly, you want to take my life if you only have that bit of guts? Tianming, let me tell you something. Even if I, Su Zimo, am exhausted, I can still kill you. Chapter 784. Many cultivators were stunned. None of them could understand how the seemingly weak Su Zimo could fight against Jining Jinjuan. Su Zimo walked slowly towards Perfected Lord Tianming with a domineering aura. The blood splattered on the ground seemed to be drawn by some mysterious power as they formed long, thin threads that surged towards Su Zimo's body wildly. Su Zimo's body seemed to have transformed into a black hole that could devour bloodlines and was absorbing energy from the fresh blood on the battlefield endlessly. Su Zimo's aura turned increasingly sinister. His blood qi surged into the air, as though he was a Shura that had just walked out of hell. Many cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat. A single glance was enough to make them feel as though their gazes were about to be devoured by the black hole. Many cultivators even felt as if their bloodlines were going out of control, causing ripples to appear in their veins. What sort of method was that? Everyone was shocked. This is, perfected. Lord Yujun frowned and pondered for a moment. As though he recalled something, his body shuddered and he exclaimed, Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. All the cultivators present were shocked and they heard those words. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra had way too great a background. Tens of thousands of years ago, a fiend of Shura sect created the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and massacred all living beings, causing a bloodbath in the cultivation world, and almost nobody could stop him. That fiend of Shura sect was none other than the infamous Blood Demon Tao Lord of the past. The Blood Demon Tao Lord was the titular disciple of Shura sect in the past and was invincible among his peers. Although he was only at the Dharma characteristic realm, his combat strength could match conjoint body mighty figures. In fact, many conjoint body mighty figures did not dare to take him head-on. Above conjoint body mighty figures was the Mahayana realm. At the Mahayana realm, they were all patriarchs of their respective territories and were elusive. They rarely attacked and were difficult to track down. During this period of time, although experts from various factions wanted to join forces to kill him, the Blood Demon Tao Lord was extremely cunning and would flee at the slightest sign of trouble. The experts from all sides failed again and again. Later on, there were even rumors that this matter alarmed an immortal sect's patriarch. Although the Blood Demon Tao Lord was heavily injured, he still managed to escape with his life using a terrifying escape technique. The fact that Dharma Dao Jun had attracted the attention of a Mahayana stage patriarch was enough to shake the world, let alone the fact that he had escaped from a Mahayana stage patriarch. This matter caused a shocking battle between the immortal and fiend sects. The name of the Blood Demon Tao Lord was known throughout the world. Everyone knew that with the aptitude of the Blood Demon Tao Lord, if he continued to cultivate, he would definitely become an emperor. Moreover, his combat strength was comparable to that of the ancient emperors. This was an absolute disaster for all living beings in the world, for the entire cultivation world. Later, a monk came down the mountain. That monk was the titular disciple of Daming Monastery in that generation, Monk Daming. Before Monk Daming left the mountain, he had always been a nobody. In fact, no one in the entire cultivation world had heard of his name. It was only when Monk Daming left the mountain and fought the Blood Demon Tao Lord to a draw that he truly became famous throughout the world. Later on, the two of them fought several more times, but it was difficult to determine a victor. It was only until the fourth battle that the outcome was decided. The outcome of that battle was a mystery in the cultivation world. There was no accurate explanation. The most widespread rumor was that both monster incarnates of the era died. However, after that battle, not a single corpse of the two of them was seen. 3 of the Mingwang prayer beads were lost in that battle as well. Even now, 2 prayer beads were still missing. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was lost as well. Nobody expected that this Fiend Sutra that was known as the evilest and most sinister Fiend Sutra would reappear in this world today. For some reason, Su Zimo had an innate dislike for that cultivation technique. He was even more against the secret skill that devoured bloodlines. Ever since he started cultivating, he had only released it once. That was when he obtained the Night Spirit in Sung Lang Mountain Range. His bloodline was devoured by the egg of the Night Spirit and he had no choice but to circulate that secret skill to survive. Just now, when he was almost exhausted from fighting the Protoss, Su Zimo had thought of using the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. However, firstly, he was conflicted. Secondly, the blood that flowed in Myriad Phenomenon City back then was almost entirely the blood of human cultivators. He truly did not want to devour the blood of his own race. But now, he was not devouring the blood of humans, but the bloodlines of the Rakshasa and Protoss. Compared to the bloodlines of tens of thousands of cultivators, there were less than 100 Rakshasas and Protoss in total. However, Their bloodlines contained a vast power of bloodlines. Right now, that power was surging into Su Zimo's body endlessly. Su Zimo's aura was rising continuously. Kill. 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 Su Zimo's eyes were bloodshot and his pupils were dyed blood red as his mind was filled with killing intent. He wanted nothing more than to massacre all living beings before him. That was the terror of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. In fact, it could even change a cultivator's mental state and affect their will. Right now, Su Zimo was both an immortal and demonic cultivator and had even comprehended the Zen of the Buddhist monasteries. His mental state was clear and his will was firm, there was no way he could be shaken. However, he still showed signs of turning into a fiend after circulating the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Streaks of blood appeared on Su Zimo's face, arms and chest, spreading everywhere in a menacing manner. Su Zimo walked towards perfected Lord Tianming step by step with a torrential blood qi emanating from his body. His black hair was gradually dyed blood red and fluttered in midair as the blood in his eyes intensified. When he saw Su Zimo in that state, perfected Lord Tianming felt his scalp prickle and his hair stand on end. A tremendous pressure surged over. Even Little Fatty and the others who were initially surrounding Su Zimo were retreating continuously and looked at Su Zimo with fear, let alone him. Fiend, don't get cocky. Perfected Lord Tianming mustered his courage and hollered. Perfected Lord Tianming's glabella shone as he pointed forward. A blinding thunderbolt burst forth from his fingertip and descended towards Su Zimo's head. However, before the thunderbolt could descend, it was dispersed by Su Zimo's blood qi. Not good. Perfected Lord Tianming grit his teeth and a hint of hesitation flashed through his eyes. However, he made a decision instantly and turned to flee. Without that decisiveness, he would have died countless times already. Since he had decided to escape, he had to escape with all his might and not hesitate. Perfected Lord Tianming knew that even if Su Zimo circulated the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, the only thing he could recover was the power of his bloodline. The latter's spirit and demonic energy were already depleted and there was no way he could catch up to him. However, he was not careless and released Zephyr Thunder escape right away. Stepping on Zephyr Thunder, perfected Lord Tianming vanished from the spot and sprinted into the distance. You're still trying to escape. Su Zimo's voice sounded with a bone-chilling coldness. By the time the word still sounded, the two of them were at least 1,000 feet apart. By the time the word still sounded, the two of them were less than 500 feet apart. By the time the last word was said, perfected Lord Tianming could even sense Su Zimo's breathing. It was so close. Perfected Lord Tianming's eyes widened as he suddenly recalled that there was an extremely frightening blood escape technique in the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Could it be, before that thought was finished, blood qi spread and covered the skies, enveloping his body. Chapter 785. Green Thunder Armor. Perfected Lord Tianming's eyes widened as he roared and channeled his essence spirit wildly. Dermic powers surged and streaks of green lightning appeared on the surface of his body in a bedazzling manner. At that moment, the blood qi had already spread and enveloped his body completely. Everyone else could only see a thick blood mist rumbling in midair. It was scarlet. In the middle of this blood mist, there were faint flashes of green lightning. However, outsiders could not see their figures clearly. The Green Thunder armor released by perfected Lord Tianming was a secret skill from the heaven-grade cultivation technique, Green Thunder Manual. It made use of dermic powers to create a thunder armor on the surface of the body that could defend against damage. It was a cultivation technique passed down by the Thunder Emperor and was extremely powerful. Coupled with the fact that the power of thunder was the most masculine, it was extremely effective against evil fiends. Perfected Lord Tianming should have had the upper hand in a clash of strength as such. However, the reality was the exact opposite. Crackle. There was a shuddering sound. The green lightning collided with the rich blood qi and the light dimmed rapidly. One after another, streams of scarlet blood qi snaked through perfected Lord Tianming's thunder armor like spirit snakes. They were endless and densely packed, penetrating every single opening. The Blood Refinement Fiend's Sutra was a cultivation technique for evil fiends. However, Su Zimo was using the power of his bloodline right now. Even the Protoss of one of the primordial 9 races could not match his bloodline. Ah! Perfected Lord Tianming roared. He could clearly sense that the blood in his body was surging uncontrollably. His blood was expanding. His heart raced continuously, as though it was about to explode. His bloodline was almost about to burst out of his body. Legend has it that when the blood demon Tao Lord cultivated to its peak back then, cultivators with weaker cultivation could not withstand it and their essence blood would be devoured completely in the blink of an eye. It was extremely frightening. It could be said that even the ancient emperors might not be able to compare to the blood demon Tao Lord in terms of bloodline comprehension. Poof! The stalemate did not last long before perfected Lord Tianming turned into a pool of blood and his essence blood was drawn out, fusing into the blood mist in midair. His origin soul was instantly annihilated by this blood energy. This was true annihilation of both body and soul. It's over. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 sensed perfected Lord Tianming's death. The battle for the phenomenon ranking had caused great waves and rivers of blood, and now, it had finally come to an end. The reappearance of the Blood Refinement Fiend's Sutra is truly a blessing or a curse for the cultivation world and Tianhuang mainland, Monkey Lu sighed internally. Perfected Lord Yujun looked over as well. Both of them saw the worry in each other's eyes. The blood mist in the air slowly rotated, forming a huge vortex. Finally, it all flowed into Su Zimo's body until it disappeared. Su Zimo stood in the air. His blood-red hair danced in the wind. His eyes were crimson red, and his entire body was emitting an evil and murderous aura that made one's heart palpitate. Many cultivators felt their blood boil and their hearts palpitate just by looking at the pair of blood-red eyes. Su Zimo's mind had obviously been affected, and it was very likely that he had already turned into a demon. At this moment, if he were to go on a killing spree, no one would be able to stop him. Wanxiang City was completely silent. None of the 50,000-odd cultivators dared to speak. They were afraid that any strange movements would trigger Su Zimo and bring about a fatal disaster. After an unknown period of time, the blood glint in Su Zimo's eyes faded gradually and the color of his blood-red hair returned to normal as well. Su Zimo landed on the ground slowly and swept his cold gaze across the crowd not far away. Just now, the cultivators who were discussing whether Su Zimo should be killed had already lowered their heads, not daring to meet his gaze. Prior to this, many of them had even attacked Little Fatty's group. If Su Zimo were to settle this score, none of them would be able to escape. Many cultivators shuddered with fearful expressions. After a long silence, Su Zimo spoke slowly, "Too many people have died today. I don't want to kill anymore. You guys can leave." Many cultivators left hurriedly as though they had been pardoned. Right now, the power of Su Zimo's inner core and Jin Dan was already depleted. However, his bloodline had recovered by more than half after this round of devouring and refinement. The feeling of being in control of power was great. In fact, Su Zimo had the urge to refine the bloodlines of all the dead cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City and absorb them into his body. That thought was extremely frightening. If he could not control it, there was a chance that he might truly turn into a murderous fiend. This Blood Refinement Fiend's Sutra is truly sinister. I must definitely not use it in the future. Su Zimo pondered to himself. The death of perfected Lord Tianming meant that the calamity of Myriad Phenomenon City was over. The surviving cultivators gathered with their fellow sect members and swallowed spirit pills and miraculous medicines. Some itinerant cultivators dispersed without leaving the city, finding a quiet place to recuperate. Brother Su, fellow Taoists, Lin Xuanji looked at Su Zimo, Little Fatty, and the others and said with cupped fists, everyone is severely injured. If we leave Myriad Phenomenon City now, there's a high chance that we'll encounter ferocious beasts roaming the ancient battlefield. Why don't we recuperate in the city before making other plans? Alright, Su Zimo pondered for a moment before agreeing. There was no longer a need for him to stay in Myriad Phenomenon City now that this matter was over. However, he was in no hurry and could recuperate here while awaiting the return of the Night Spirit. Right, Lin Xuanji pondered for a moment and continued, you're the number 1 of the Jin Dan Phenomenon ranking this time round. There's a reward for you. Normally speaking, after the phenomenon ranking was confirmed, cultivators of Enigma Palace would preside over it and distribute rewards to the cultivators according to their rankings. However, there were way too many unforeseen events in the fight for the phenomenon ranking this time round. Although a victor was decided between Su Zimo and Di Yin, it caused Jining Jinjuan to fight and the two of them even fought their way out of Myriad Phenomenon City one after another. By the time Su Zimo returned, the Rakshasa and Protoss had already descended and he did not have the chance to obtain the reward. The reason why Su Zimo wanted to fight for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking was secondary, the main reason was because of the reward. The reward for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking was extremely tempting. In fact, there was even a chance that heaven-grade cultivation techniques and Khanate dermic weapons would appear. If nothing went wrong, Su Zimo would definitely advance to the nascent soul realm after leaving the ancient battlefield. However, up till now, he did not have a Khanate dermic weapon of his own. The old monk of Dragon Burial Valley told him that if he could obtain a Khanate dermic weapon at the nascent soul realm, he could refine it into his destiny dermic weapon. As his cultivation realm increased, the power and realm of his dermic weapon would increase as well. If its grade did not change, it would always be Khanate. Although Su Zimo was looking forward to the reward for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, he knew that now was not the time. Myriad Phenomenon City was filled with devastation with blood flowing like rivers and corpses strewn everywhere. Many cultivators were severely injured and perfected Lord Yujun even lost an arm. There's no hurry, Su Zimo said, we'll talk about it after Senior Yujun recovers from his injuries. I'll stay in the city for a period of time. That's great, Lin Xuanji nodded with a smile. The reward for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking was extraordinary and required Jining Jinjuan of Enigma Palace to channel his essence spirit and activate the ancient phenomenon steel with a secret skill of Enigma Palace. The ancient phenomenon steel formed a dimension of its own. It contained countless rare treasures, weapons and cultivation techniques. As for what treasures one would obtain, it would depend on one's luck. Chapter 786. Su Zimo's group settled down in the main hall of Enigma Palace for the time being. Everyone was severely injured. Thankfully, they had Xiaoning's elixirs and recovered gradually after a few days of rest. They would be fully recovered in about a month's time. Su Zimo's body was pierced by the spiked shackles of the Rakshasa race and his right arm was snapped by the Protoss leader. His stamina was long depleted after the consecutive battles. However, he had mostly recovered in just a few days. The wounds left behind by the spiked shackles had already healed and were even forming scabs. His severed arm was reattached as well. He would be as good as new in a few more days. Even the 3 Jining Jinjuan could not compare to his recovery speed. Will Night Spirit be fine? A few days had passed and Night Spirit had yet to return from hunting down the remaining Rakshasa remnants. Qing Qing could not help but ask worriedly. Don't worry, he'll be fine, Su Zimo smiled gently. There was probably nothing in the ancient battlefield that could hurt Night Spirit. Although there were less than 10 Rakshasas that escaped, it would indeed take some effort to kill all of them given that they were fleeing in all directions. Su Zimo fell into deep thought as he recalled the final exchange between Night Spirit and the Rakshasa leader. At the last moment, it was clear that the Rakshasa leader had discovered something and was killed by Night Spirit before he could say anything. What secrets did Night Spirit hold? What was his relationship with the Rakshasa race? Right then, Suzumo's heart skipped a beat as he raised his head. A figure appeared outside the door, leaving behind an afterimage and entering the main hall without touching the ground. It was Night Spirit, who had not returned for a few days. Night Spirit looked travel-worn and weathered. By the looks of it, he had not rested for the past few days. "Are you all right now?" Suzumo went up and asked softly. Night Spirit nodded and looked into Suzumo's eyes, avoiding his gaze and hesitating to speak. He was struggling in his heart. Brothers should be honest with each other, but the secret he carried on his back was too shocking. If he spoke of it, who knew what kind of upheaval and change it would cause? Seeing through Night Spirit's thoughts, Suzumo smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "There's nothing between us. Don't feel awkward. Let's talk about it when you feel like it." "Yes." Night Spirit's heart lightened. Monkey, Linghu, and the rest also surrounded him with concerned looks on their faces. However, they had a tacit understanding and did not pursue his secret. "Young master." At this moment, Nianqi came to Suzumo's side and bowed deeply to him. Suzumo brushed his sleeves and gently lifted her up. He smiled and said, "You've already entered Misty Peak, so we're considered fellow disciples. There's no need for such formalities." Nianqi shook her head hurriedly and said seriously, "That won't do. Even though I've entered Misty Peak, you're Nianqi's benefactor, young master." Pausing for a moment, Nianqi rolled her eyes and pouted slightly, saying in a cheeky manner, "Furthermore, I'm young master's maidservant. It's only normal for me to be courteous." Back then, in order to avoid the pursuit of the dragons, Suzumo hid in the capital of Great Zhou and established Mo's spirit weapon workshop, taking in Nianqi. For more than 2 years, Nianqi stayed in Mo's spirit weapon workshop and helped Suzumo with many errands, claiming to be his maidservant. Not many people knew about this, and Monkey and the others were shocked. Linghu seemed to have thought of something as well as he winked at Suzumo from a corner and chuckled foolishly. Little Fox clenched her fists slightly and looked at Nianqi with a nervous expression. Her body was tense and there was even a hint of hostility in the depths of her eyes. A sweet fragrance wafted over. Demoness Ji came before Suzumo as well, looking pitiful and resentful. "Young Master Su, do you need a maidservant by your side?" "I'm willing as well." "Cut it out. What are you trying to do?" Suzumo rolled his eyes and said in annoyance. Demoness Ji was clearly teasing him, how could Suzumo not tell? "Young master, I'm sorry." Nianqi tugged at her sleeves and lowered her head, saying weakly, "I hid my identity and didn't tell you the truth." Back in the capital of Great Zhou, Suzumo had already asked about Nianqi's background. Nianqi merely said that his parents were dead and he was homeless. Everything else was vague and unclear, and Suzumo did not pursue the matter. Suzumo waved it off. "Your identity is special. It's normal for you to hide it." "What's Nianqi's identity?" Shi Jian was perplexed. He looked at Fatty and asked in a low voice. As expected of silly Jian. "You're truly silly." Little Fatty slapped his forehead and lamented. In reality, although nobody mentioned it, everyone present was sharp and could vaguely guess. There were only 7 Protoss, and yet, they managed to capture Nianqi alive without killing him. There was something wrong with that in itself. Nianqi was extremely beautiful with creamy skin and exquisite features. Looking at her alone, one might only find her breathtaking. But if one put Nianqi together with the 7 Protoss, one would see the problem. Nianqi's temperament was too similar to that of the Protoss. The only difference was that the Protoss had golden hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, while Nianqi's hair was yellow and curly. But Suzumo knew that only difference did not exist. During the battle at Misty Peak, Nianqi was forced into a desperate situation and a mysterious power awakened in her body. Her battle prowess skyrocketed and her originally yellow hair also became soft and smooth. This was the only way to explain a lot of things. Why Nianqi did not have a spiritual root, but could cultivate. Moreover, her cultivation speed was extremely fast and she was born with boundless strength. Why after more than 20 years, Nianqi did not seem to have changed and was still the little girl from before. This was because the blood of the god race flowed in her veins. Protoss had a long lifespan. More than 20 years, in the long lifespan of a Protoss, was negligible, so there would not be any changes. When he first met Nianqi, Night Spirit's behavior was a bit abnormal. He ran to Nianqi's side and sniffed around, as if he had discovered something. Now that he thought about it, the Night Spirit, who was still a cub at that time, might have already smelled the Protoss's aura on Nianqi. Nianqi's eyes dimmed as she said softly, "Young master, there are some things that I did not lie to you about. My parents are indeed dead. My mother is a Protoss and my father is a human. Half of the Protoss's blood flows in my body." Mentioning this matter, Nianqi's tone was calm, but there was deep sorrow. With my identity and impure bloodline, I was considered an anomaly among the Protoss and was not tolerated by others. That was why I escaped and wandered outside without a fixed residence until I met you, young master. It was not hard to imagine how much pain and torture this little girl had suffered in the hands of the Protoss after losing the protection of her parents. Everything is in the past. Su Zimo's gaze was gentle as he consoled softly, "You just have to remember that from now on, if you don't want to return, no one can force you." When she heard that, Nianqi pursed her lips and her eyes reddened, almost crying out loud. When they saw that, everyone knew what was good for them and dispersed. "She's a Protoss." The Golden Lion was shocked and mumbled as he walked. "A Protoss as a maidservant. Big Brother is indeed strong. The primordial 9 races. How impressive was he in Myriad Phenomenon City a few days ago? Who would have thought that Su Zimo already had a little follower of a Protoss more than 20 years ago?" You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.